so okay. Let's make these tournaments real quick. All right, we'll make the under 1600 section 1 day long. Under 1600 section 1 day long. Under 1600 section. Starts today at 20. Starts today o'clock at 20. Create. Starts today o'clock at 20. All right, there's the first link. Hey, Cross. All right, there's the first link. Hey, Cross. All right, there's the first link. Hey, Cross. Okay, let's close this and make the next one. Okay, let's close this and make the next one. Elle a sûrement raison. Elle a sûrement raison. 90-30. Friday, February 21, 20 o'clock. Friday, February 21. Must have played before. Must have played before. V. Sorry, I haven't opened YouTube chat yet, so anybody on YouTube. I'll be there when I can be. Chat yet, so anybody on YouTube. Okay, you were hearing an echo. Sorry, and thank you. YouTube. Okay, Yvonne and Drew, hello, greetings. Exclam fight only works for those on Twitch, Drew. So you will have to be able to find those links through this, maybe the chess.com club for Chess Dojo, which is over here. Something like that might get you there. Folks, you can see the tournaments there. And I'm going to go grab a real microphone and help with the crazy kids. Okay, now we've got the real mic connected. Oh, Hockey Chess Dude. Pretty late, huh? Pretty late. Nice, Drew. That's great. I'm glad to hear it. Hope you love it. Let me know if let me or Jesse or Kostya or somebody know if you run into any issues or things that you don't love. All right, let's see. Hopefully that audio is reasonably good like that. Let's go over here and check the arena. So we already got a couple people joining the 1600 plus. And if I go to the under 1600, whoa, we already got 5 people there, so they're good. Under 1600 looking good. For those of you over 1600, we need 1 or 2 more people to join in the next 10 minutes. Why is Ben talking? Says, this is going to be fun. I've never played before. Hoping I can still play good chess this late. Yeah, if you've never played before, hopefully you can play well. Ambitious. You probably played somewhere before, just not Friday Night Fights, huh? Alrighty, this is going to be great. The tournament's going to start in 10 minutes. Commentary is going to start in 10 minutes as well. Right now, I'm still wrestling the kids to bed, okay? So if anybody who's new to this is like, why does he start the show when he's not here to start the show? Basically, starting the show acts as a kind of announcement that the tournament is starting. And people get that Twitch or YouTube alert, and they go, oh yeah, Friday Night Fights, and then they come and they join the tournaments, and the tournaments start. So I have to start the show, 20 to 30 minutes before the actual show, just to get the tournament announcement out. So I do that for the Friday night tournaments and the Saturday morning tournaments, which will be tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. Those will be rapid chess. Tonight we're talking classical chess. So for the players over 1600, we've got a 90 plus 30 arena. For the players under 1600, we've got sort of fast classical, but we've got 45 plus 30, a pretty robust time control. So yeah, there it is. Go ahead and join up, and I will be back in 5 minutes or so. And if people come into chat and they don't know what to do, direct them to how to join, especially if anybody in YouTube, right? Folks in the YouTube chat, if someone comes into YouTube and they can't figure out how to get into the tournament and they're typing like !fight and stuff and it's not working for them, maybe help them along with this, Chess Dojo Club link, or give them some direction that might point them towards the event. I will see you all soon. right, still working on bedtime. How's it going? How's it going? Can you guys hear our whole bedtime routine out there? I do sometimes mute it, and I do sometimes don't. Looks like we still need one more person for the 1600 plus crew. Very, very faint bedtime direction. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, like a directional mic. It should not pick up very well when I'm in the other room. Oh, you heard some snapping, huh? Yeah. Get in bed and make it snappy. No, that's not what I said. I was just like all very sweet to them because I was in a good mood. You know, I think when you're more or less patient with your kids, it might just have to do with like what kind of a mood you're in and not really how good or bad a job they're doing of brushing their teeth or whatever it might be. Like one of my kids was just sitting there sucking on candy and not brushing his teeth, but I was in a good mood. It didn't bother me. I guess it wasn't like ideal or anything, right? I'll go back in one more minute and see if he's done sucking candies. I know it sounds like another kind of disaster. Like, what is going on? No, my kids did some really good stuff this week. They learned to ski, and we rewarded them with candy. There's not normally you can't even find candy in our house, so. But it was a really tough challenge for them. So we let them like watch some movies at night and eat some candies. I did not ski. I was on baby duty the whole time. So I was with the 2-year-old, and my partner was out with the big kids and an aunt. We're lucky enough to have an aunt who's like a super good ski instructor. So this was our kids' first time doing it, and they're very, very scared, and it worked out great. All right, I'm going to go circle around and see if we can finish up the teeth brushing. Are we rapping after one game? You want me to write a rap about your game, Drew? Is it going to be a really good game? You're allowed to play however many games you want to play, but you know a game can take a couple hours. So very often people just fight one game and then they bask in the afterglow of being exhausted. You know. So in general, folks, I recommend that everybody monotask during their game. Right, just play the game. Don't check emails and text people and blah 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 blah. It's another Drew, Hockey Chess Dude. It's another Drew. So I recommend monotasking while you play your game and giving it your all, and trying to use about 80 or 90% of your time if you're able. And in general, if you play one classical game, you should feel pretty sated and used up or something. You know, you should feel like like you don't have enough in the tank to play another. But for those who for one reason or another want to play a second, they're allowed to. You know, sometimes an opponent resigns too early, or you hang your queen on move 3, and then you just want to start over, you know, and you can do that. You can do that. All right, looks like I've got like 1.5, 2 minutes before the game starts, so I'm going to run back and forth. Be right back. 3 seconds to spare. All right, games are on, my friends. The next Drew Shattuck. First time Friday nighter, wears the bread, has perhaps played every single Friday night. By contrast, Death by Lactose, also a frequent Friday nighter, giving us a little Queen's Indian action here, but maybe even an F5 Dutch. That's my speed from when I was rated 1780. That was my number one. Black opening was like this sort of Nimzo Dutch kind of thing. I would normally start with like a Nimzo move order. Bishop on b4, trade it for the knight on c3, put my knight from f6 on e4, and then follow up with f5. Yes, this is maybe a more respectable move order, but I think f5 was probably possible here if someone really wanted it. Let's check out the under 1600 crew as well, see what kind of games they've got brewing. So we got a Rusty Spork up against Sherbs. Advanced Caro. Aggressive maximal variation by black. You know, c6 and then c5. No pieces out. Just trying to take apart white's center. That white obviously has no pieces out either. They've just been building the center. Then we've got Big B against Blake, who might also be a Big B. Big boy. Big banana. Big bread. Bread. This looks like a mainline, whatchamacallit, e takes d5, Scandinavian. And typically white now plays like knight d5 or knight e4. And then the queen moves and white trades a knight on f6. It's hard to say why that's such an exciting idea for white, but that is the big theory from Big B. Says that's the way to go. See, we should have one more game going in this battalion over here. I suck at chess. Probably not going to play very well against YW Lucas. YWB Lucas, part 3. Banned for cheating twice, back for a third time. Are people going to use their time? Asked Mr. Hockey Chess Dude. Huge question, right? YWB, you're welcome, buddy. Lucas, part 3. Already using their time 4 moves in, so that's a pretty good sign right there. Knight c6, logical, going after the pawn on e5, which white will probably look to defend. It's a pretty good pawn. And who do we have watching today but not playing? Say hi, because otherwise I'll be lonely. Just kidding. But if you're in chat, feel free to say hi. Jake. Hello, Jake. Cross online and Acratic. If you can finish the game with the most time, you win. That's a mini game, which some people do appear to be playing, huh? Stamen is present. Always looking at self. Hey, always looking at self. I'm looking at you too now. It's good. You don't want to be a layabout. Good not to lay. Or play. Oof, flew. Ouch. Oh, the fight heats up immediately in this opening here between I Suck at Chess and You're Welcome, Buddy, Lucas, part 3. After knight c6, going after this pawn, I Suck at Chess defended the e-pawn by waylaying the knight with bishop b5. Black plays queen a5 check, which double attacks the pieces, but it also has this clever idea that after you play knight c3 defending the bishop, white can't build up this... Let me show, like, let's say I played a normal move for black. There's this idea for white where you go here and then here, and you build up a pawn chain to support your extra pawn on c5. That's a pretty common theme of something white would set up, and especially if black played sort of imprecise moves that don't directly fight for these two pawns. And let me play like another I don't know, weird move that doesn't. Then, especially white's going to create this chain and hold on to that pawn on c5 big time. So queen a5, by forcing a knight to c3, it stops that whole c3 b4 plan. Maybe white could still try a3 b4. We'll see what comes up. YWB is still thinking about it, and I think we had another game that was also the same opening, so let's go check that. It's Blake. Nope. This is the... I got tricked. It's Sherbs and a Rusty Spork who have the same opening. All right, so in that other game, we saw bishop b5 from white, right? Here we see knight f3, bishop g4. Oh, and we get a very similar pattern with bishop b5, queen a5 check, knight c3. I think there's like a trick here for white. Isn't there a trick? Like you can play the move c3 or something and it's somehow brilliant. Let me see. c3. If they take here, 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 boom. That's brilliant. What if they take here first? We take, they take, check, and here. How is that brilliant? There I don't quite see why it's brilliant. Knight f3, bishop g4. I feel like c3 is supposed to be brilliant here. But the sign of a move being brilliant is that it's not obvious why. Maybe c4 going after this whole thing, because if black takes or pushes or anything, basically we're attacking a piece that can't move with this pawn on d5, because the idea is if it moves anywhere, then boom, 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 and black loses the rook, because the queen has to block. So c4 could be interesting, might put some pressure on black. I don't know exactly. Let's say here, we taketh, they taketh, we goeth, they goeth. Taking, castling, developing. Is this so amazing? Rook here. And just winning a pawn, and we have the bishop pair. Right? I think at Kraai you're confirming that c3 is a genius move according to engines. I'm trying to recover / understand why instead of just asking. The engine, since obviously the first time I learned it, it didn't stick, so I'm gonna have to do some work to get it to stick in there. This c4 move looks pretty annoying for black, I must say. I tried knight f6. I don't think e6 would be much different. White could go doom, 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 doom. Castle, threatening rook e1. Bishop e7. Rook e1. Knight f6. That wasn't so amazing. Knight c3. Knight f6. Rook d1. Simple enough. Same deal. Bishop pair, extra pawn. All good. Oh, c4 was correct. Ho-ho! Which ones? Oh, quite a question. Maybe harder than the question here. This could be, but honestly, this is all pretty clean.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the question first.
Yeah. I mean, that I wore for less than half a day.
What did you wear for the last 4 days?
This and this one and pajamas one day.
Which one?
Shh. All right. So, anyway, it's obscure. You have to be an engine or a GM to fully figure that all out if you don't have it memorized. But the c3 move, there you go. I gave you some useless secret sauce. This is a super engine, super move that is somehow brilliant. It doesn't make any sense. You would, if you were playing this position, you'd think, well, I'll play like bishop b5 and keep the knight from taking here. Or you might think of like bishop f4 defending the pawn, or bishop e2 with the idea that if they take and take your pawn, you take here. Yeah, I mean, not useless to you, Socratic, because you are at a master level, but to 9/10 of our viewers, somewhat useless to know that c3 is a super move. And yeah, I'm just saying, human moves, bishop b5, bishop f4, bishop e2, right? So like, why do we find this genius move? I don't know. But so it is. It's a genius move. Okay, let's get back to the game, which is going to look very similar to other game, right? Queen a5 check, knight c3, e6. So we're going to do a fun thing here. We're going to bounce back and forth between these two games and compare them, right? Because we got twins today. Twin games. Okay, so queen a5, knight c3, e6, a3, takes anyway, b4, takes, Sherbs, bishop b2, and black's taking all Sherb's pieces already, straight out the gate. Oof. So played a3 thinking bishop c5 will lose to b4. Black plays bishop takes c5 anyway. Somehow white didn't smell the rat. Plays b4. Ay. Gets taken here. And even here, white doesn't slow down properly. Even after bishop takes b4, white doesn't slow down. The best move would be to take here and give up your rook. But white just keeps jamming along and loses pieces. Queen takes c3 is better than queen b5, but it doesn't matter too much because you're going to be up a piece. But after this check, the queen can't block. So, disruptions to white's supply lines and development continue. And, yeah, you're rightly confused, Hockey Chess Dude. They are just going way too fast. Both of our compadres here just banging out the moves. Let's check on the other board. Hopefully they'll not be as far along. Knight c3, d4. Nope, that was also too quickly played. White cannot take it. Your knight is snick, snack, snopped. You could do this. Very, very fancy idea from black, right? You guys see that? Queen b5. Whoo, fancy. Problemito. After all this, white is up 2 pawns in the endgame. So, like, high marks for being fancy, low marks for winning the game. Right? White chose a simpler approach, which is bishop c6 first and then grabbing the pawn. That's pretty safe as well. And after e6, white plays knight e2. Now, I have been accused of being too greedy at times, but sometimes defending your stuff is just correct, okay, folks? Sometimes your opponent attacks a piece of yours, you should simply defend it. I do think, like, for all the fact that you could be accused of being, a pawn grubber or a dirty materialist or something like that, as opposed to a dialectical materialist like me, for all that, in more than 9 out of 10 cases, I think when someone attacks a piece of yours, you defend it or move it. I think that's truly a basic truth in chess. And here, this bishop e3 move is unimpeachable. It's developing one of your pieces and defending your pawn. I don't need to turn on an engine to know that we should defend this pawn with bishop e3. That's got to be the right move here. So white played knight e2. Black got a pawn back. Hello, Gabriel. But I just want to say, Jake, even if it weren't doing some special cramping thing, but you're right, I guess a pawn that's worthless, maybe we shouldn't work too hard to defend, right? But But in general, when someone attacks something of yours, you defend it. If you can do it while developing a piece, I mean, then it becomes very, very likely that you should just defend it. So we get knight e2. Tempo on the queen. Look at that. We're actually losing time by not defending our pawn because now our queen is getting tempoed by a developing move, right? Like, they're not even threatening to waste their time going off to the side of the board to take our pawn. They want to develop a new piece, take the pawn, and tempo our queen. Black's actually winning time by us not defending our pawn. We could have saved time by defending it. Queen a4. That's a good reaction from white after losing the pawn. Potentially gets the tempo back because black might not want to trade queens with us. Attacks c6 as well. There was like a slightly tricky move possible for black that I would have gone for here. Queen b6. Because I save my queen from the trade and I defend my c6 pawn. And since I'm down a pawn as black, right? c3 against 2 on the queen side. Since I'm down a pawn as black, I'd rather not trade queens unless I get something out of it. So I think queen b6, that would be my move as black to just keep the best chances for the game. Black goes for bishop b4 and white says, you know what? I was kind of saying I wanted to trade queens with an extra pawn, but maybe this game could go faster with queen c6 check, potentially to capture the rook as well. Uh-oh. Queen c6 was a big threat. It wasn't just a pawn. So we're going to say bishop b4 was a mistake. Black did not properly calibrate how big this queen c6 threat was. Ay. So both of these games were following. By move 10, somebody was, just up or down by a full piece or a full rook. See what's happening in our twin. White offers the queen trade. Desperate because they can't coordinate their pieces. Interesting practical choice. You're down a piece, but you go for that queen trade so you can at least coordinate your rooks. Oh, it's interesting. I don't hate it. But black noticed the threat to b7 despite blitzing along. That was unfortunate for white. Rook gets another file, blocks it. Oof. Couple careful moves from black, and suddenly it doesn't seem like much prospects for white, right? A bishop is kind of blocked in. Good square for the knight. Black's blocked both the rook's files, so white's not really doing much. Gets castled. Black here is threatening knight b3 and knight f3. Pretty evil, but white finds their way out of it. Anybody out there who's in the training program might know what Jake is talking about when Jake says at this rate, these games won't even count for dojo points. There is, in the fine print, on the training program task of playing a certain number of games, in the fine print it says that if you lose a game and spend less than half of your time, it doesn't actually count as playing a game, basically. So in other words, if you, and this is, there's a basis to this, obviously, like everything that we do or say, and the basis in this case is not just to troll or make a joke or something like that. The basis is this: like, if you're going to lose a game, you should at least be able to say that you made an effort, you thought about it, you spent your time. If you win the game, then okay, you could argue that you knew what you were doing and the game was easy enough and you didn't have to use all your time. Still probably good to use some of your time, but it's true that, like, if you were just playing some normal opening moves you knew, and your opponent started hanging their queen and you took it, and you wouldn't, the game might not be that interesting for you and you could win without using all your time. But in general, to earn a dojo point from a game, you're supposed to use at least half the time. So if it's a 90-minute time control, you should be using 45 minutes. If it's a 45-minute time control, you should be using 22 and a half minutes plus some of your increment. Okay, so knight d4 with the other knight re-threatening these forks, and this knight is stopping king e3. Does white come up with an answer? Not yet. I pop back to my twin. Bishop d7. Yum. Here. Check. Here. Check. Careful, white. You think white knows this? Gf6. Some of them might not be in the dojo training program first night, and others might not have gotten the memo. It is in the fine print, after all. Like if we had a task that said play in a chess tournament, somebody might register for a tournament, show up for the first round, then withdraw and go home, and think, oh, when I played in a tournament. But then maybe somewhere in the fine print it would say, like, play your games in the tournament, or something like that. But, you know, all this comes with experience. Like, everything comes with experience. It's no problem to play too fast. It's no problem to not know exactly what a task is about. It's totally normal and okay, right? We only learn things through experience. Well, that's not the only way we learn things, but a lot of people learn primarily through experience. So it's okay. You know, we do it. We learn, we do it again another way. So I repeat Jake's comment about using half your time, not to, you know, cap on or insult any of the people who are here fighting in front of us, because all my respect to our fighters. But just to share that point, because it's a good one, right? That we're trying to use some of our time in these games. I tend to use about 99.9% of my time in every game I play. Whether my opponent is, you know, a grandmaster or a 2000 rated player. So Jake is saying, I have definitely had tournament games where I slowed down just to make sure I can get a point out of it, which is partly funny. And, you know, the idea of the training program is not to make anyone do something artificial or whatever, or not to have you like thinking about and worrying about dojo points when you're in a tournament. You know, mostly when you're in a tournament, you should be thinking about the tournament, or even more precisely, you should be thinking about the game you're playing at the moment and not even the whole tournament. But that said, if the dojo has gotten into somebody's mind to the point where they're playing a game and they think to themselves, I should spend some more time thinking here instead of bashing out another move. I mean, that's not the worst thing that the program could do. I mean, it almost sounds like that would be a good feature of the program. So actually, these players, you know, they have slowed down a little bit. They're spending some time here, but they didn't start spending time early enough in the game for how soon they clash tactically, right? Like, we have tactical clashes happening here at move 10, and in the other game, we had a tactical clash starting around the same time. Let's see where it starts. It starts here with A3 already, tactical clash, right? So the players weren't ready to start calculating really hard at move 8 or 9. That's also like a typical thing that can happen to people, right? Is they come into the game and they're not immediately in the game mode. Now let's catch back up with the game. Good defense from Sherbs. And Rusty retreats the knight in order to support the fight for the c-file. That's some nice team playing from the knight. Not being too proud. Not being like, hey, I'm posted up, you know, mismatch, get me the ball. You know, the knight's like, okay, I see what we got to do. Like, I actually should help the rook on f8 to get to the one open file on the board that we're fighting over. We're at this standstill, right, where I have not tricked white into trading on c8 so I could take the file. And I don't want to take the file myself because I don't want to trade myself, because then white gets the file. And then rook c7 comes, and then the technical task becomes difficult. So team player, the knight, drops back to e7. Good call, Rusty. All right, so we were here with this game. Queen steps back off of this diagonal and keeps this pawn protected. And that was the longest think we've seen yet tonight, so props to them for that. It's another way the knight could be thinking, yeah, once the rooks are traded, the ball will be all mine. It'll just be like a special 1-on-0 power play to mix our sports together. So from white here, it can make sense to castle in either direction to connect the rooks. It could also make sense to re-centralize the queen. At the moment, the queen's not doing too badly because she's keeping the knight and rook from moving. Pretty good. So often when you snatch a piece in the opening on A8 with your queen, you're kind of in a hurry to get back out, right? Make sure the queen doesn't get trapped. So I guess we should wonder about bishop c6, right? Is that anything that's going to worry white? Actually, it worries me a little bit. I only see one square I can go to. And from here, I don't see anywhere else I can go, really. I definitely feel a bit nervous about this. I think probably I can survive, but it's risky to stay inside. A little bit risky. So white might want to save the queen or play bishop e3, trying to save the queen while eating a pawn. Okay, a little bit greedy. Let's see what white did. Save the queen. Okay. Nice. Stamen with the bishop e3 suggestion. Good suggestion. Yep. I think that would have been a very nice move as well. White gets the queen out, and now white is up a rook and 2 pawns. You know, half a move ahead on development. King has 2 decent areas to castle to, right? Either side looks like a perfectly fine fortification to protect a king behind. And, yeah, everything should be clean and simple. And as Jake says, from a certain perspective, when you're up a full rook, you know, you don't really want to go into something like this where anything starts being like complicated or spicy, where like if you miss something you could lose a whole queen. Like you can really like let off the risk button a little bit at this point, and a move like queen f3 does that quite nicely. Hello, friend. Are you a cat yourself or just a lover of cats? Bishop c6, yeah, come into that diagonal. Now, I could see this or this being very plausible moves. My preference is queen g3, keeping the pawn defended, and nice big threat of queen g7. Queen e3, I feel like black can play bishop c5, and then I'm not really sure why I played queen e3, you know? If I play queen e3, I pretty much think I didn't even look one move ahead. I don't think that I saw bishop c5 coming. So I imagine that Lucas is going to play bishop c5, and then we'll see how I Suck at Chess responds to that unpleasant feeling of having missed a move for your opponent, right? Will it throw them into a tizzy, or will they be able to recenter, accept it, reassess the situation, and keep going? Let's check in on our even faster players. Rusty Spork and Sherbs. Knight e7 was what we last saw. A4. And now this plan here. Rook moves away. prevents counterplay. And then the knight heads that way. Knight d4. King can chase it back out, I think. Or even the rook could. I think like the next step here would be to bring the king out. I don't think the rook and knight can win the game against the king and rook just by forcing their way through. I think you actually need your last piece to be ahead, right? Without the king, we don't really have a winning material advantage here. It's not that there's nothing we can do, but imagine you go rook a5, your opponent goes rook c1. You know, the simplest thing would be to play king d7. Maybe we can make all this work, but to me the simplest is to use our last piece. Knight d4 played, king e3, knight check. Got to give Sherbs credit for using more time than Rusty Spork. At least it can be unsettling when an opponent plays this quickly and hard to take your time when your opponent is playing things instantly. But it's actually all the more important to stick to your tempo rather than getting caught up in your opponent's tempo, right? You have to play the game at your rate, the rate that works for you. A lot of people look at their clock versus the opponent's clock to determine, am I playing slow enough or fast enough? But really, you need to only look at your clock and almost ignore the opponent's clock and just ask yourself, do I have the time that I need for the problems I have left to solve in this game? Am I using too much or too little time so far? You know, on the opening or on the middle game, etc., as you're progressing the game. Knight h4. Looking to maybe win the pawn on h2 with this knight check. Yeah, not yet hitting on the idea of activating this king, so we'll see. I think the endgame will be, excuse me, mildly competitive until the king comes in. If the king comes in at some point, then black will kind of be easily winning. Our other game, bishop c5 did come in, and white spent 2 minutes and then maybe recovered from the shock. Although, aren't they allowing bishop g2 and bishop f2? Maybe they needed more time to recover from the shock. Because bishop g2 seems to trap the rook, pretty much. Unless white's got a tactic I don't see. You attack the rook, it's only got one square, and that square would only make things even worse, right? So if black plays bishop g2, the best you could do as white is just castle and, you know, give up the rook, give up this extra pawn. Now the game would become much closer. White's ahead enough, they would still be ahead, but I love that black's thinking here. Bishop f2 is also possible, but after king f1, you know, we don't really have anything majorly winning. And I know it makes the game harder for white to play if you mess up their king. But I feel like this bishop g2 move wins so much material, I would have to do that and take back that material now and then, you know, just hope that more mistakes come later, even if the game's not super complicated yet. But yeah, black's really reflecting on it, which reflects well on black. Lucas in this game, the one who has used the most time, so winning that particular mini game or competition. All right, choice has been made. Good night, hockey chess dude. Bishop g2, same choice that Pruess would have made. Right on. And I Suck at Chess is really getting tested here, right? Because things were going so well at the moment of queen takes c6 check, queen takes a8 check. Everything was going so well. And now, you know, they just overlooked a move, overlooked another move, and then you really have to pull yourself together. You have to pull yourself together. You know, do you still want to win this game? Or do you just want to go tell a woe is me story to your friends about I was winning by so much and then I just blundered again and woe is me, you know, why do I always do it? I should just quit. Your friends are like, yeah, you should quit telling us this story and actually spend your time on your games. Knight a4. It's the kind of move you play when you want to turn the tide, but this move does not do the trick. This is, again, not calculating black's possibilities, and the tide is continuing to turn. Black can actually take this pawn with check and then save their queen. And then, you know, our knight is still just dangling around here, right? So, for example, look at this sequence. Check, here, here. How is it helping white to have this knight over here, right? The king can no longer castle. 2 pawns are gone. Rook's hanging. Knight's hanging. Rook's trapped. It's getting rougher and rougher, you know? So, yeah, white needs to dig really deep, but they need to dig really deep in a hurry because this game is running away from them, you know? Again, I mean, even if you end up losing the game, it's still good if you turn it around at any point in the game and start like taking your time and working hard and like fighting for it. If you show that will to win the game instead of that will to lilt and have a great story of tilt, it's always good to recover. It's never too late as far as like building up your strengths and your reserves and your skills for the next time. So I should say, even if white, you know, loses the knight and the rook and eventually the game, if there ever comes a moment in this game where white, like, you know, uses more time than Lucas and really, like, we can just sense that they want to win that game, that's still going to be worth something. That's going to say, you know, that this is somebody who can make comebacks in the future, who's building the skill set to do so at some point. But right now, what do you folks see? You see YWB, Lucas part 3, who blundered a rook on move 10 of this game, was down 2 pawns as well with their king on the run, and not a single weakness in white's camp, not a single spark of hope for black. And yet, look at how they kept using their time. Right? And then when they see a shaky move from white, right? So here white starts playing shaky moves. Queen e3. Bishop c5, black thought 2 minutes before playing it. Queen d3, hanging g2. Black thought for 2 minutes before deciding whether to take on f2 or g2. So black's not getting overexcited, right? They're taking the game seriously and making a real effort with the time resources they have to say, like, what's the most I can get out of this? Now, you could say I'm down a rook and 2 pawns. It doesn't matter what I'll do. I'll eventually lose anyway, right? Like, the following variation can be really dispiriting. If you sit here and calculate for 5 seconds as black, you go bishop g2, castles, I take the rook, they recapture, bishop f2, and what's the count? The count is black is down a full knight, 4-0. White's king position is impeccable. White is ahead in development, and black's pieces aren't particularly good. So you could say, well, what am I even playing for? You see what I mean? Like, it would be so much easier to give up as black than as white, right? To sit here and be like, well, what am I even hoping for? You know, bishop g2, I'm still lost. Bishop f2, I'm still lost. Who cares? I'll just play one of these moves, and maybe they'll blunder. And if they blunder, I'll start playing. But for now, I'm just going to just keep, you know, throwing moves at the board quickly and pretend like I don't care so that I don't feel worse when I eventually lose, right? I don't want to invest anything more in a losing venture. But instead, what you see is black taking every little thing very seriously. What's the most I can get out of this, even if I'm down a rook and 2 pawns? Can I get 1 pawn out of it? Or can I get 2 pawns out of it? Can I get an exchange out of it?
And queen c6. And again, and thinking a couple minutes every move. You know, at like a 2200 level, what you'll see people doing more is thinking like 5 or 10 minutes on an important move and then playing other moves in like 30 seconds, you know, sort of more quickly. But at this level, it's harder for them to predict each other's moves, and spending like 2 minutes thinking on each move is actually a pretty good tempo here for Lucas in this situation. It's working out pretty well. It means every move, you know, Lucas is assessing, what has I suck at chess done? What are my attacks and defenses? What do I need to watch out for? And then, you know, taking a moment to look one move ahead maybe at each of those options to see what's looking better or worse. And, you know, that's like great. That's great. Really has not given up on the game at all after losing the rook. That's that great sign. All right. Sorry to hear that, Ben. Let me click on our twin game, which seems to have ended already. So this game went the king. Oh, look at this. Unable to like force a win with the knight, Rusty Spork decided to bring out the last piece. Right on. King came back. And here white resigned. Black, I guess, can start pushing these past pawns. So, so Rusty Spork takes it. And Sherbs is asking, is in the chat here with us saying, I don't normally play fast, so I have no explanation for what just happened. You know? And I was wondering, Sherbs, if it might have something to do with how fast your opponent was playing. Because sometimes people get sucked into the rhythm and tempo of their opponents. So I wondered if that might have something to do with it. Your opponent playing so fast, leading you to play super fast. And then my other thought was, the game got tactical so early. Like already here when you're calculating A3 with the idea of B4, that's like these are starting to be pretty intricate calculations already on move 7 or 8. Sometimes at move 7 or 8, a player's not yet warmed up enough to really get into things and calculate. So there are some players who are going to struggle if the game gets tactical too soon. They won't really be ready for it. They like to, you know, develop a few pieces, wonder what's the best square for my bishop, you know, choose whether to put it on F4 or E3, and then slowly they kind of warm up and get into the game. For you, the calculations just weren't clear at night like this, maybe. Yeah, that could be too. All the more reason, if you ever find yourself in a situation like this as well, Ben, all the more reason that you might need to push yourself if you're ever in evening games, right? To actually take more time realizing that you're a little less sharp or less clear in the evenings. An hour of easy tactics, like ending right before your game, that should have you warm, but it is a lot of work for right before a game. Normally, I stop working the day before a game, honestly, on my chess. And on the day of a game, all I do is, like, take a walk. I mean, everyone has to find their own pattern and their own energy. I might be a lot older than you. Oh, you're keeping your heat map streak going. Gotcha. They say that can be addictive. Hey, Neetham. All right, anyway, yours is one of the two games that we covered for good or for bad. You can watch the VOD to see other things we said about your game. See, we just happened to stumble upon two twin games. You see this? Like immediately, very similar games, right? So today I decided to cover two games together at first. Normally I cover one game, you know, occasionally I bounce between a million games. Today it made sense to cover the twins. So you can watch this the recap, and you'll get to see your game and this other game in the same opening that you were playing, kind of. All right, let's catch up with this. In this game, we've got YWB, Lucas Part 3, who's been fighting really hard after losing a rook and several pawns around move 10. Has been fighting really hard to try and get back into this game. Let's see how they're doing now. Bishop b4 check. King e8. Keeping the queen out of d8. Again, black thinks for 2 minutes to pick the square. They don't just, blitz out king here or king here. Wow, what discipline. But I see that I Suck at Chess has turned the corner. They are now fighting. I can tell that their time usage has just taken off. And they're going to try and fight their way back into this game. Or, I don't know about back into this game. They're up a rook at the moment. They're looking like they might lose the rook back and have to start over. But they look like they found that will to do what they can with this game. So let's see how that goes for them. So what are interesting moves for white here? Gosh, I wish I could castle. I really want to develop this rook. I understand I'm losing pieces, and maybe I should count how I can lose the least pieces, but I really want to develop my rook too. Because if I could play rook d1, I could start threatening things like queen d8, queen f8, then something for my opponent to worry about too. But here it's not very easy to play rook d1, is it, with this king here? You go king d2, rook d1, king c1. But it feels pretty slow. Like our opponent's going to take this, maybe tempo the queen here. I have to do something or I'm going to lose this knight for nothing as well, right? So here I guess white's winning. It's really unobvious, but I guess white is winning this way. I sacked everything just to put a rook on d1. Did you see how that worked, folks? That was kind of weird. Let's recap it because to make sure we understand what happened. I played king d2. I didn't save my knight. I didn't save my rook. Bishop h1. I don't save my knight. I don't save my rook. I just go here. Bishop e4 for tempo. Queen d6. And this move was losing. I suppose black could have now traded queens with a somewhat equal endgame. And I suppose here, black could have considered trying to snatch this piece. And then queen d6. Maybe bishop d5, keeping the rook out of the game. That looks pretty strong for black. But, I mean, maybe the game goes on a little bit. I go here, just developing my rook. Queen d7, trying to trade off my queen. I just go in there. The knight can't develop yet because of mate, so the rook can't get in either. Queen a2, Knight c3. Check. I could go knight b1, or I could do this. Oh, shoot. You play bishop e3 first. That's vicious. That's nice. Nice tactic for black. Yikes. Bishop d5. Bishop d5. So king c1 is not good enough here. So I have to do knight c3 first. And now, it keeps the queen out of a2 at least, right? So the queen comes here, we check, king comes here, check, king goes here, take this. Well, that wasn't so bad for white. Huh. You see that? Knight c3. Oh, this move is like a big deal. Queen f8 to g7. Complex. I like that I Suck at Chess's clock is still running, I think. This is like their biggest thing in the game. And look, they're catching up on time with Lucas, which means they're here to fight. They weren't here to just, cash in the rook and then blitz out a few moves. No, they've decided they're here to fight, win or lose. Excellent. This game. Blossoming. This line, very, very interesting for white, this rook d1 line. Grabsus prefers for us to start the game with the line with rook e1, give this piece, right, and this piece, and then go on the attack like this. This does look better than my initial suggestion. Oh, queen b4 check, sorry. We have to go queen d6 now, I assume. And then the idea is we always have this queen f8 g7, actually, and the knight can't move because of mate. So black looks like they're in a lot of trouble in this rook e1 line as well. Yeah. Maybe after rook e1, Grabsus, perhaps what black should do is take here first, threatening the bishop, leaving the rook because the rook is trapped. Why would we take it? That allows rook d1. We just leave it here forever until it threatens to get away, right? Queen d6, queen d7. I trade that queen before it can mate me. Right? And only after a move like this will I take, and I get an equal endgame for black. Ooh. Thanks, casual player. Yeah, things are going all right. Yeah. Is the endgame equal, though? I mean, relative to one player or the other being up a rook, it's very close to equal, Grabsus. I mean, you're presumably rated 1,000 points higher than the participants, so you're going to wonder this question of equality at a different level than they are. But when commenting this game, I'm trying to comment sort of at the level of the players here, and we're just getting a sense that basically an approximate balance has been kept here, right? Just they have the same pieces on the board. That's already basically, we don't have to look any further, because at some point white was up a rook and 2 pawns. And here we're wondering, can white save those pieces, or can white develop this and get like an attack going? So, I mean, your move rook e1 is perfectly good, and this king d2 move was also pretty reasonable. Both of them seem to be decent candidate moves for white. And given how long white is thinking, they might really be coming up with something here. They've just played b3, defending the knight. So they decide they want to keep the knight on the square it's on. And I presume black's going to take the rook now, and then we'll see how white intends to develop, because material will be basically equal after bishop takes h1. So hopefully white has like a nice idea here. I think we came up with 2 very, very strong ideas for white, but they're not really rating level appropriate. The idea of moving our king while leaving everything hanging is pretty weird looking. I think your idea of moving the rook somewhere where you can recapture is something that probably I Suck at Chess did consider, like moving the rook somewhere where they could recapture. I would guess that was a thought. The king d2 move is pretty weird. So let's see, b3. Look at black even taking time on bishop takes h1, just respecting that white spent 8 minutes on b3, and like, okay, we can probably snack the rook on h1, but let's just check, what do they have in mind? What's coming up? Why not? You've got half an hour on your clock. You can spare a minute or two here and there and everywhere. Does black have bishop e4? Like before taking the rook? I suppose you could play bishop e4 here. But I think you probably want the rook, and then you could reposition your bishop somewhere better. Black takes. Good tempo. White reveals their idea, king d2. So very good. Very similar to my idea with king d2, right? I Suck at Chess prioritizing developing this rook. You're thinking if they go queen c3, we could trade queens before taking the rook. Or, I mean, why are you so worried about queen trading? You could also take here and let them trade queens. Hey, Wampus Cat. We were watching your game with the Sherbs, and Sherbs has already been in here a bit ago. Unless Sherbs has already played a second game in 5 minutes, but I don't think so. So we got bishop h1. Sorry, Stamen. No, bishop d5 somehow like a misclick. The line was supposed to be bishop e4, queen c3, and then baby bishop h1. But bishop takes h1 first makes sense to me. King here. Now you could bring the bishop to e4 or d5 would be reasonable. You could also play knight e7, right? Working on development. Oh, wow, you got 4 students in the tournament, Wampus? That's excellent. Well, your students are doing the work. Great to see them there. Didn't Big B and Blake get paired with each other, by the way? Big B and Blake, I feel like they were up against each other. And I glanced at their game. Oh, they're spending their time. Good on them. 30 minutes each. Great. More or less equal materials. The black king is in more danger than the white king, although the white king's not super well covered. So black offers a queen trade. Looks reasonable. Oh, they're probably going to get to play an endgame too. Opening, middle game, and endgame. Everything. Very nice. So when you say esports chess team, does that mean that you're all at a university together? Like I don't know if people call it college or university these days, but that's where I think of esports teams being. Oh, high schools have esports teams now. Okay. Nice. The high school chess team. Now, you're a teacher at the school or a very young chess teacher who is also a student at the school? Bishop e4 played. And amazingly, the whole esports team has girlfriends. Okay. So what do you teach when you're not teaching chess? Guten Morgen, Gray Fox. You're better at history than at chess. Okay. At my high school, I was at first the teacher of the chess team, even though I was a student. Because most of the people on the chess team were my friends, and I was like, I'd already been playing for a couple of years, so I was just a little bit ahead of them. And then after like 2 years, the school was convinced to hire my chess teacher to come and teach the team. So then my chess teacher came and taught the team for the last 2 years at my high school. That was amazing. He wasn't a teacher at the school. He was just a full-time chess teacher. Nice. My high school had 320 students, and probably about somewhere between 20 and 30 were in the chess club. Yeah. So it's good. It's a very healthy sized club. The kids will be feeling socially satisfied to participate in a team of that size. as well as enjoying the chess. All right, so white offers the trade. Several people in chat were guessing that white might want to go queen c3. For black, should they move the queen? I guess queen d5, you have to worry more about queen c8 later. So did that, queen d7 makes a little bit more sense in that respect. Also, queen d5, you kind of block some of the mobility of your own bishop. So queen d7 might be slightly better than queen d5. But black makes a very nice choice and just develops a piece. Right on. Look at that. If white wants this queen trade so bad, they're going to bring that knight from g8 to c6 and then pay one more tempo with the bishop. The big question is, can white, go after black like this? And the big answer is, well, I'll leave it to somebody in chat to tell me whether or not white could grab this pawn and start attacking the black pieces, or if white should stick with some version of a queen trade. Yeah, the question's not really for you, Kapsus. I would agree. Queen f6. Is this good or bad? At what level... Okay, so Gray Fox Hound is curious. At what level should anyone... Hey, Asher, good to see you. At what level do I think one should hire a coach for teaching? Right? So it depends a lot on the person and on just basically how much money they have too, right? Like, having a teacher is never going to hurt you. So on the one hand, somebody with infinite money, if they're interested in chess, there's no reason they should ever not hire a coach, right? Like, it depends what money is worth to you to say whether or not it's worth hiring a teacher. Whereas somebody with no money should obviously not hire a teacher because they need to, try and pay for food or something, right? So, so the answer is going to be different for everyone based on their money as well as on their chess. But I'll say one really useful place to get a chess coach is if you're ever on like a plateau where you're not improving, right? So imagine, so sometimes somebody's like 300 and then 2 months later they're 400 and 2 months later they're 450 and they feel like they're learning things, right? But everybody eventually gets good enough that chess gets harder and everyone gets stuck somewhere. And having even 1 or 2 lessons with a really professional chess coach can be a good way of getting unstuck, right? Because they can tell you, here's what you're doing wrong, or they can point you in a direction or something like that, right? All right, back on the big TV. Friday Night Fights. Kumite, 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 kumite. From another perspective, Gray Fox Hound, another good time to hire a coach is right when you're getting started, if only for 1 or 2 lessons, and just ask somebody like, hey, what should I be studying, right? What should I start with? What direction should I take? Like, make sure you learn the fundamentals or start in the right direction, because a lot of times somebody will learn stuff super wrong and then later they have to unlearn stuff. You know what I mean? So I guess I would say, wenn man sich das leisten kann, there's basically a lot of good times to have a coach. And, the very first day I walked into a chess club, I was lucky that there was an incredibly good chess coach who, had all kinds of kids of his own under his supervision there already, but took the time to meet me and my brother and get to know us, and then immediately started giving me free lessons, right? So, of course, it was very good for me, right? Free lessons from a good coach from the very beginning, so I'm not learning anything wrong. But I don't know if this is a clear concept or not, but learning things wrong is something that happens, right? And can become a problem later. Like you could learn to play piano holding your hands wrong, or to play violin holding your hands wrong, or something like that. Holding a tennis racket wrong, holding a pencil wrong, learning how to write, you know? And then you get used to something and it becomes even harder to ever do it in a more optimal way. So even 1 or 2 lessons very early can be helpful. But then one other tip I can give you, Gray Fox, is that in general, most people should be able to get up to, let's say, somewhere in the 1,000 to 1,200 range just by playing games, reviewing their games, and doing tactics. All right, so I think the game's going on, so I'll give you guys the answer to this puzzle here. For anyone who's wondering about it, the answer was queen c2, checkmate. See, the bishop's covering the escape squares for the king. So after knight e7, white cannot go over to f6 to avoid that queen trade. In fact, they're kind of stuck here in the face-off. An interesting move for white would be maybe rook f1, developing the rook, challenging the bishop, looking at f6. In the game, white played knight c5, bringing the knight from a bad square into the middle of the board, challenging this bishop. I like this move a lot as well. And I love how these players have turned this into a very thinkful game. Knight d5, going after white tactically. Is black going to be able to take and win a piece? It looked like a nice idea, this knight c5, but it might be in the process of being just tactically refuted by knight d5. We'll see. We see YWB Lucas putting in some hefty thought on knight d5 now, and then on the follow-up after knight d5. So they might be spotting this, but maybe white takes on e4 when you take on b4, right? Like takes, and white won't lose a piece. So they're doing a little bit of calculating. So to finish my answer to your question, Gray Fox, it could be great to have 1 or 2 lessons with a teacher right when you're starting out. It could be great to have 1 or 2 lessons with a teacher if you ever get stuck somewhere, like hit a plateau where you're not improving. Or it could be great to get 1 or 2 lessons with a teacher the first time you hit like 1,200. So if you can get to 1,200 just playing games and solving some tactics in a year or so, that might be possible, and then you could get a lesson or 2 then. You can play bishop e3. Okay. So black could also play bishop e3 before making a trade. Yeah, another thing that black must have been considering. They've just moved, and they've played bishop e3 check. So they're going to push this king back. See, the knight's covering here and here. They're going to push the king back and keep the rook trapped on a1. Very, very clever. And then after the king moves back, they're going to have a choice between going into knight takes b4 kind of moves, or even just, the black piece that's attacked is this one on e4. So let's say the king goes to d1 for argument's sake. Maybe it goes to e1, right? But one or the other. Let's say the king goes here. You could potentially just, back off with this piece and leave white in a more complicated situation versus starting to calculate knight b4, which I don't think particularly wins anything here. You have to calculate it. If it wins a piece, it wins a piece and you play it. Kavutskiy tells us there's some kind of a fork if the king comes here. So let's see if we can find that fork. Oh, yeah. That's beautiful. Knight here. And if white takes, then we take here. Okay, even this, it's quite a calculation. But for argument's sake, we'll stop there for a second, and we'll say that if white takes here, we can now win with knight c2 at the end. That's Kavutskiy's point. Now, knight b4, queen b4, bishop c5, queen b8. Does this win for white instead of for black? I don't know. I doubt it. My instinct says no, but it's messy because black actually has to sacrifice this rook, right? And then trust that the white pieces are so discoordinated that we're going to have a winning counterattack here. which is not 100% obvious, right? Hey, Leviathan, how you doing, friend? You're wondering if bishop f8 traps the queen? I mean, she's got all these squares to go to, so I don't know if we can capture her. We could leave her sidelined for a while, right? Also, we can try for immediate attack, because right now the bishop's covering this, so the queen's not threatening too much. We could go after the king with a check. If c3, they lose their rook. If they move the king somewhere, then at least, you know, we get in and take this pawn. Try to keep attacking from there. Yeah, for some of us, our time is more valuable or more limited than our money, right? It depends. But certainly if it's a question of your time with a coach will pay off more than time on your own if you were spending that time studying chess. And remember, you don't have to do, like, if you sign up for lessons, it doesn't have to be every week, right? You can say, I want like 2 lessons. I just want some tips on what I should be studying or what I should be reading or things like that, you know? And it seems like your English is very good. So you could also check out this if you want. We have a training program on Chess Dojo. You can see if you want that. It costs about the same as 2 private lessons, and for a full year of the training program. Or maybe this YouTube video here might be a useful resource for you. Here, this exclam new thing. There's a YouTube video that I made that gives advice for getting from getting into the game to getting up to about 1200. So you could try out that video and see if that's good for you. Oh, casual player. Good luck with the shoveling snow, and indeed, it is late, and I wish you a nice hot chocolate. Let's see where this game is headed after. Okay, King E1 was the move from white. Bishop F5 from black, just keeping all the pieces and all that tension. So this square here is a bit better for white in this variation, because at least the rook can come out compared to King D1. But black is definitely threatening knight takes b4 here, right? Oh no, I guess we're still not sure if queen b4, and there might be queen b8 at the end, right? Maybe one of black's best threats here is just rook g8, getting ready to, you know, attack the king at some point. I know the knight's on g1, but it might be nice to just finish developing our pieces. Knight d4. Boom. Boom. Forces a trade out of black. Oh, this game's intense. I love it. It's funny. Here, black could try to go win the rook. Like this. Let's say, right? But then at the end, white can go and win black's rook. And then on queen d4, the knight bops back, and we still have an endgame to play out. Oh, yeah. And, Lucas is putting in the work. Beautiful. 17 minutes left. Hey, Chess with some Arth. Well, thank you. That's very kind. I thought it was, like, fine. I didn't know if it was, like, love-worthy, but thank you. I'm planning to do even better commentary in 2 weeks, because there's going to be the next play-in for the Freestyle Grand Slam series. I think the second event is in Paris, and the play-ins are going to be in 2 weeks, approximately, on chess.com, early to mid-March. And, oh yeah, I'm so pumped on the year of the Fisher Random Chess. I don't think I'm going to Grenki Klapsus, no. You're welcome, Gray Fox Hound. I hope something there will be helpful for you or useful for you. All right, so queen d4 played. And Lucas has gone from playing too fast in the first 10 moves of the game to, potentially using their entirety of their time on this game. It's really nice. Do I know Gukesh's next tournament? Very good question, Samarth. Oh, yeah. Volgrey Foxhound, I hope your daughter is a sweet Süße Schatz. I wish you a wonderful Samstag with her. I just spent a week with my daughter who was on vacation from daycare. She had a week off, and it was a wonderful, wonderful week. Stamen, I think Black has already played King E7, King E8 this game, so actually they cannot castle. That's a good point. So if they want to get the rook involved, this rook G8 is probably a very important move here. So the big moves are knight b4, queen h1, just pure calculation, or rook g8 continuing to develop. Rook g8! Ooh. All right, so Chess with Samarth asked, do I know Gukesh's next tournament? Off the top of my head, I don't. No. Let me see if I can figure it out real quick. I know that in just like a few days is starting an interesting tournament called the Prague Masters, which he's not in. I think he's playing Norway chess with Carlsen, Caruana, Nakamura, etc. But that's in a couple months. That's in like 3 months. He probably is playing something before that. Let's see. There's an American Cup this year again. He's probably not in the American Cup. There's some Grand Chess Tour, Rapid and Blitz in Poland. Not so interesting. Grand Chess Tour Romania, but that's like a week before Norway Chess, so I don't know if he'll do that. I mean, he's young. He could do it. Why not? Let's see if I can find out anything about the Grand Chess Tour Romania. Who's playing there? It says the best play here. Well, they should have Gukesh then. Okay, the 2025 tour players to be announced? What? They don't yet know who's playing, I guess. I don't know. Paris Freestyle is before Norway Chess, Asher, but I don't know if Gukesh is playing in Paris Freestyle. I don't know per se. I don't know. Today's your birthday. Oh, great. Have a nice day, Gray Fox. Happy birthday. Herzliche Glückwünsche zum Geburtstag. He said he would at the prize ceremony of Weissenhaus. Rook g8's a very nice move. White is definitely in trouble here, but I wouldn't say the game is over, Grapsus. I mean, they've got equal material, and they're not rated 2900, so anything could happen. At the moment, Black doesn't have a major threat here because of Rook g1. The biggest threat is maybe Knight b4, Queen b4, Queen h1. There's a lot of ways to prevent that. We've had some swings here for sure. You think he's going to go play some open tournaments? That would be great, Samarth. Yeah, I don't know what he's playing. And honestly, even if he wants to play the Paris Freestyle, I don't know if they should let him. It was so brutal in Weissenhaus. My God. I would tell him to go play in the qualifier if I were the organizers of the Grand Slam. I wouldn't invite him back after that. He obviously didn't belong in the tournament, right? It's tough to say as a fan of his, but we also have to be honest people, you know? We have to be honest. Like, I mean, there's probably like 200 players that would be better to invite than him. Ay, ay, ay. Rook G4. Oh, that's a brutal move. We hadn't yet noticed that specific threat. Oh, God. That's a nice move from Lucas. Boom! Who says you can't win a game if you hang a rook in the opening? Who says you can't? Who says you should resign or give up? You're welcome, buddy. Lucas, giving us a very important morale lesson for all of us. You can absolutely hang your face in the opening, and you might as well still play a good chess game afterwards. I agree, Asher. Gukesh will quickly improve. But there's a long way to go. That tournament was so brutal, and he definitely wasn't learning very fast during the tournament. Rook G4, beautiful move. I suck at chess is to be commended as well for having taken their time and turned this game into a real interesting fight. Yeah. Hearty approval for what both of these players have done in this first game of the night here. And folks, you know, anybody who's rated, you know, 1800, 2000 and forgets what it's like to be a beginner, you have to understand these players are rated 900 and 1000, and they have been playing for an hour and 20 some minutes already. You know, so they are playing a game more powerful, intense, and epic than players of this rating level usually ever do. You know, it's a good accomplishment. Okay, the queen backs up. Keeps her eye on the bishop, depending on who recaptures and how. Yeah, you just got to keep trying here as white. You got to save the queen, and then the next step would be to try and get this rook to a better square if you want to keep fighting. Also, just continually looking at the most obvious threats for black and trying to prevent them, you know? So, like, if black plays knight b4, I imagine black's biggest threat would be queen h1. So then as white, if possible, you have to play a move that avoids queen h1, you know, or that minimizes how strong queen h1 is. I don't know that there is any move, but, you know. Okay, knight b4 has been played, so this is live. This is the question for white. Is there any move that doesn't totally die to queen h1? Not really seeing it. This rook could cover the square, but if we step up, we allow rook g2. And if we bring the queen over like this, then after check and we block, there's rook g1. So it's not even that helpful to block. Maybe we could play king d2 here, defending the rook. Just hopping along. So, rook d1 has been the choice from white. Okay, looking at queen d8 and rook d7. So sometimes when you can't stop your opponent's threats, folks, this is very important, especially for anybody under 1200. Sometimes when you can't stop your opponent's threats, don't play some feeble move like looking in that direction, like, you know, queen g2 or something that doesn't really stop it. Instead, ignore the threat completely. Do something that gives you a chance to come back if they don't see the threat. Like here, if black plays queen takes c5, thinking that's their primary threat, you know, plausibly, you could have something go your way as white in this sequence, right? Let me see if I can arrange something. It's still pretty hard to do. But anyway, I don't think I can quite show a win for white here, but you want to do something where if your opponent goes wrong, there is a scenario that still works out for you. So sometimes just completely ignoring their main threat is actually your best chance, even if it's a 1% chance or something. That's the move that saves you some games. Okay, Chess with Samarth is giving us supposedly a quote from Gukesh's current trainer Gajewski, or second, that winning Norway chess is one of the most important goals of 2025 for Gukesh. So he might spend a lot of time preparing for it. I can understand why that would be a major goal, because basically it's the only classical tournament this year, potentially, where he'll get to face Carlsen and Nakamura. So winning that tournament would be, maybe like one of the best classical challenges he could face in a tournament. That said, I don't think, even with that, Samarth, I don't understand why you would why you would prepare 2 months for it. Part of preparation is playing a lot. Like, one of his big, advantages he could have against Nakamura or Magnus would be having more practice in classical chess than them. So he should keep that edge by playing more, staying sharp. It's not it's actually never optimum to spend 2 months preparing for something. The World Championship is perhaps the one exception, but it's very specific because you only play one opponent. You want to get really deep into their strengths and weaknesses. You want to push your opening selections really deep and have ideas that you can go back to, etc. It's very different than any tournament. I don't think there's any tournament you would rather prepare for more than a month instead of playing another tournament. I think you should play a tournament every month to be in top shape. And there's no preparation that keeps you sharper than routinely playing tournaments. All right, so after rook d1, let's see what black did. Knight c2. It looks pretty good. Defended by the bishop, checking the king. King doesn't have great squares. King went to f2. Now black has available checkmate in 1 and some other good options as well. Yeah, I'm with you, Gapsu. I think that queen f2 move, stopping rook g1 and allowing queen h1, king d2, and it's not clear how black wins. This may well have been the best option for white here. But okay, rook d1, knight check, king here, queen c5, reasonable, but this was checkmate in 1. But this is a fine option as well. Queen check. Average Joe thinks Magnus is going to win any tournament he plays right now. For 15 years, that's pretty much always been true, Average Joe, right? Magnus overall played quite well in that tournament, right? It's just Kamer played a little bit better in the match against him. But Magnus played great in his matches against Noterbeck and Sindarov as well. Just came up a little bit short against Kamer. Obviously, Magnus is still very strong. So it's a fair bet that he could win any tournament he plays in. But if he only plays one classical tournament this year in Norway chess, specifically Gukesh's advantage could be playing more classical tournaments than him, right? Like if Magnus has played a lot of Champions Chess Tour, rapid events and stuff like that, he could come into Norway sort of just not calibrated to spend his time, maybe not with the opening repertoire work that Gukesh might have. So that's where Gukesh's advantage, or anyone else for that matter, where their advantage might lie, right? Is that Magnus is more interested in some other formats now. So for him to play Norway chess is partly based on his good relationship with the Norwegian organizers and him wanting to promote that event. But if his heart's not really into playing classical chess, he might be missing. He might not be a shoo-in to win that tournament, and I don't think he would be. Honestly, I think Norway chess has these Armageddons, and I think that Magnus is probably a favorite to win the tournament just off of like stealing some points from the Armageddons, the rapid chess compared to Gukesh. But in the classical, but if you just counted it in sort of the normal point counts for classical, I don't know that Magnus would be like such an odds-on favorite. I think it might be a toss-up. No, Asher. I think Queen C5 is close enough to a knockout. I would advise Lucas not to get under 5 minutes here. And I think so far spending 1 to 2 minutes per move has been a very good pace for Lucas. It's really working for them. They're making like no more blunders ever since they started thinking 2 minutes per move, and they're finding lots of quite good moves. So I think Queen C5 was fine, and spending 2 minutes on that move was reasonable. I wouldn't say you should spend, like if you see Queen takes knight check, winning a piece and continuing to chase the king, I don't think you should spend another 5 minutes looking for, Queen G2 or Rook G2 or something. Like the move's good enough, keep some time on your clock. I think is pretty reasonable. Is that a recent interview, Stamen? Is Magnus currently feeling zen? I would like everybody to be feeling kind of zen, It's a nice thing to be feeling healthy and in control. King F3, good move from white. Alternative choices like King F1 let black play Rook G1 or Knight E3 kind of moves, right? So yeah, the Armageddon format definitely does not favor Gukesh. Yesterday with Joe Rogan. Okay. That's pretty fresh. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I feel like he should be. Nice move, Queen C6, coming back after winning the piece, coming back to this weak diagonal. I mean, this year is a huge opportunity for Fischer Random Chess and for Magnus, right? Like, he's excited about this freestyle tour. The first tournament was awesome. So fun and exciting. So hopefully, even though he didn't win it, he still enjoyed playing a tournament like that. Hopefully he still found that tournament was like the kind of thing he wants to be playing, and it energizes him for the next one. King E2. Now you can sort of swoop in closer with the queen or the rook. Are pretty good choices. I guess Queen G2 is probably also good. I love how this game went from being a 2 minute, oh gosh, they should have used their time, oh, hanging a rook, oof, to being an absolute epic battle. It was more obvious with the king on f2 that queen g2 was mate. Now it's less obvious. But Lucas spots it. Well done. A point to Lucas part 3. Bravo. Right on. All right, and let's go to the 1600 plus group and catch one of their games. All right, so 1600 plus arena. Here's an interesting position between Jupiter and Drew. In the 1600 plus group, nobody's finished a game yet. They're all still using their time. That's awesome. Well, this knight better be able to get back in the game over here. Okay, so Asher has a question, you know, for the players of the level we were just watching, right? 900 to 1,000-ish level. Is it more important to try and play good chess but run out of time, or focus on time management and accept playing somewhat worse? I think, Asher, it's a bit of a balance. Like, there's always going to be a time limit when you play chess, so it makes sense to respect the time limit. Instead of being like, oh, I'm starting to play so well, but like I flag and then I play better and then I flag even earlier in the game, and then you're not even playing end games or middle games because you're flagging so soon, trying to play perfectly. I think you should respect the time control and you know, try and play well within the confines of the time control you have. And if the time control you have is a time control where you're flagging all the time, maybe try and play a slower time control. You know what I mean? Like if you're playing 30-minute games and you're always flagging, then start playing 60-minute games and see if you still always flag. And then move it up somewhat. Yeah. Here, Panda Chess Tamil, let me help you to find the games, because that command fight only works on Twitch, not on YouTube. So here's a link to the club, and in the club you can find under current events these Friday Night Fights tournaments. Okay, so let's go to this game here and try and get deeply into one of these games here. So we've got knight and 2 rooks against knight and 2 rooks, plus the queens are on the board. Black's got the isolated D pawn that's slightly weak, but white's got the king position that's slightly weakened by this move g4. Presumably a bishop was bothering white on h5 earlier in the game, and they played g4, made the bishop go back to g6 and traded it. We can go confirm that. See the bishop on h5 bothering white, g4, traded. Black decides to take on the isolated d-pawn specifically because white has already weakened this area of the board. If black just waits around, white can slowly squish black with pawns over here with extra space. The way to counter that is to open the center. So that's a perfect move from black that got us in this direction here. And now developing the rooks. Ah, that's not an obvious move, but it's kind of nice. He wants to bring the knight to g5 even faster to start poking at white's weaknesses, maybe. I would have, if playing quickly, I would have played a simple vanilla move like rook to the open file. Yeah, black was ready to bring the queen in, so they make the trade on c1 themselves to get here. White can't challenge this file? Well, they're covering knight f3. Maybe they could. Maybe they don't do this because of queen here, you know, getting into this pawn. So white played rook c2, and black doubles, preparing basically rook e8 and back rank mate. Okay, white could sack a queen or whatever, but you see the idea. Black doubles on the e file, this open file. White's going to be dead because the king position's weak, right? The queen has to defend h3, so the king's got this artificial The king's vulnerable to back rank mate despite having the pawns moved, creating weaknesses in front of the king as well. So you're biased towards playing better chess and worse time management, which makes sense because you're a slow perfectionist thinker. So you want to play great moves, lose on time, and say, but I was playing well and that's more important. Which is fine. It's your prerogative to feel that way, right? But so what I gave was just my perspective, right, Asher? Which is kind of a balance, right? There are people who are more into the time element and the sporting element, and people who are more into the perfectionism and the art. And I'm a little bit in between, where I want to play great chess, and that's what really motivates and interests me. But I've absorbed the fact that there's always some kind of parameters or time control within which you're trying to create that great game or that art, right? So... Right, so Galois says, maybe h4, this knight is so well placed, kick it off, and then it'll be easier for white. But my first question would be rook e8 anyway, because pawn takes knight is too late. White's already got to give up the queen. So rook here, white has to have a good move in mind with h4, and I'm not yet seeing what it was. It was to come back. Makes sense. I just calculated a silly long variation, Klapsus. Do you notice that black could technically play this move? And so I calculated this. The king needs to keep the queen covered so as not to... because you have to be able to recapture the rook, right? So, okay, there's a perpetual here. We don't have knight e2 because this knight's on it. Ultimately, we can do something like this and go after this pawn, and after b3, black achieves nothing, right? The knight holds it, and white's good. So it's not a good variation for black, but it's in the air, so we have to watch out. Given that it doesn't work, black probably has to back off at this point, and that means we could go knight e4 where we're not really going anywhere, or we could go knight e6 to trade white's knight. If we think white's knight is better than ours at this point, we could do this move. And that says this knight's better than ours, and we're just going to emphasize the e file by trading it, and then we can put a rook on e2, among other things, at some point. And we're hoping that white won't be able to take back with the rook. They'll have to take with the pawn. There are a couple things that might force white in that sense. One is that this rook's defending that rook, and the other is that the rooks are defending this sort of artificial back rank. So if I go here, I guess here's one important point. Against queen f3, I don't have to trade queens. I just win the game with this here and here. So they can't trade queens. They might trade rooks. Then we come here, and I just want to play this move. And this looks pretty decent for black. That said, h4 is a challenging move, right? Because you make black back off with that aggressive piece. It's exactly the kind of move white needs to play. Your h4 move. Did white play something yet? No. Okay, they're having a good think about it. This is exactly what you need to play before the position creaks so much that it breaks, and then you're threatened by these knight checks as well. So I feel like h4 makes a lot of sense. And here, you're going to wonder if white can keep the knights on the board, right? And keep black from totally controlling this row. And that's exactly what makes sense. And then I guess here from black. And probably I'd play something like rook e1 and sack this pawn. Maybe I should just keep my pawn on the board. I don't know.
Right. This way white can play rook e1 because this knight's in the way. And I could already play rook e1 here. I was just afraid, you know, rook b2 and then maybe queen a4. Maybe I just lose off of pawns. It's not like I've got, you know, counterplay or an attack for white. So finally I decided I'm going to not lose my pawn just yet. So I'll play b4. Could also play b3 if that seems better later. And this knight's really in the way of black's power. Maybe I should have considered rook e4 here, trying to win a pawn, just really focusing on the pawn. Right, like in terms of b4 versus b3 here, b3, maybe black plays knight c5, attacks this. It could play knight d3 as well because the rook's busy, right? And knight e4. So this looks pretty strong. And the move b4 takes away knight c5 and protects these pawns. It's not so obvious what black wants to play next after b4. You know, maybe even something like a5, but that's not... At the scale of what white has to worry about, that's not as killing as what we were looking at just before. And actually, I mean, I'm already thinking maybe black should just play here and try to win a pawn. You know, just admit we can't really do better than that. Man, I'm wanting to, you know, play b4 again and then here maybe get my pawn back, but I can't because of this. So I think rook e4 probably wins a pawn. Maybe that's where it goes. Immediate knight c5. I don't know exactly when I should play knight c5. My rook. You attacked my rook right away, I think. Let's see where we're at. Rook e5, h4, rook here, which I do believe in. Rook c1. There could be knight e4 if knight e6 is not good enough. Knight f3 made sense, and rook e4 makes sense. Yeah, rook e4 makes sense. And I think, you know, we're probably winning a pawn for black. But, you know, the game still goes. Like, even this b4 move I played, as white, you could just say, like, yeah, I lost a pawn, trade, king here. Now black still has to play an endgame, right? And they don't yet have an obvious place on the board where they're going to win the whole game. Isolated pawn, doubled pawns. It's not, like, so easy for black to take over and start pushing for a queen. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know about yourself, right? I mean, of course, black's better with an extra pawn, but, you know, it's not obvious how to play the position. Maybe we come back to my a5 idea. You know, here, here, here. But actually, I maybe have a clever defensive idea for white here in rook b5. That might be enough to trade off enough pawns to draw the game. Basically, the idea is here, here. Oh, maybe that's not even the right one to take first, but I don't know. Here, here. It's this kind of a scenario. Very defensible. 2 against 3 on one side of the board. You know, very good chances to hold a draw in that kind of endgame. So, yeah, let's see. Are there ideas for white other than h4 here? Like, what else makes sense? Is there rook e2, for example? This move is fancy, but ineffective, I think, after king h1. If you trade, white trades here first. And this doesn't really accomplish anything. Could trade here, and then just take a pawn. Rook d5. I can win a pawn for black here on h3, huh? Ooh, and then maybe a second pawn.
I wanted to do this the fancy way again. You know, this is the move that I'm, of course, calculating every time. But not only queen f1, like, why did I do all this? But there's now this square. So maybe I spend too much of my time looking at this kind of move. But very simple-ish solution. Knight check. Queen needs to cover the rook. King h2. Check. Or, sorry, trade. Here. And then maybe like this. And I've got 2 extra pawns at the moment. I know stuff might be hanging on my side, but this pawn's hanging too. So I think I'll be up easily 2 full pawns at the end of this variation. And importantly, I've got an area of the board where I can expect to win the game, right? I can overwhelm white on the king side with these 3 pawns. You think they made a move? No, they did not yet, actually. So rook e2 doesn't work. I think just queen a4 is good enough. And then, you know, we're playing moves like this as white, get tied up, or, you know, queen in here and go after this one. So there was h4. There's rook e2, which I'm saying looks insufficient. I would like to do this to cover some of these squares and maybe play queen g3, but it's too slow to dig out because of my back rank. See you, Asher. Take care. You saw it switch whose move it was? When I go on rook e5, it only plays h4. Try reloading the game. No, just rook e5. Queen f2. Death by Lactose having a good little calculation and a good little position here. It's on another board that I just popped into my view that this might be an interesting position. Black has sacked a piece to go for this attack, right? You can see knight a4 here. And just going for it. Yes, exactly, Stamen. Makes me think white must have had a better defensive move last move, huh? What exactly was black's threat here, folks? I believe it's not super obvious, but I think the threat in this kind of position, it's slightly slow moving, but first you go rook h2, and then you go queen h4 behind the rook. So you can play rook h1 with f2 cut off by your queen. Because if you do something like this, sorry, let me mark time for white. If you do something like this, it's not really clear, like, where are you going, right? And same with queen h4, like, what are you really threatening? You'll check, they'll come to f2. So I think the threat from black in this kind of position is to go rook h2, and then depending on what white is up to, queen h4. But Darkadonk, you think we could maybe get something going like this, huh? Okay, yeah, I could see that working in many cases. Depends what's going on this file, right? Because white would pretty much have to play rook g1. Then depending if the knight's defended or what other options there are here, yeah, it could be interesting. Whether we've got the d file. You know, whether with queen check we can maybe trap the rook. Or if the king can go here just fine. Queen h4 or queen g3. Yeah, I could see that being interesting as well. But normally, like rook h2, queen h4 is the typical way of building up a threat for black. Queen f2. Death by lactose. Being very careful here, spending some time. Rook h1 seems really clean. Not too many moves to calculate, honestly. Like, if you think this long, maybe you don't see rook h1. If you see rook h1, I mean, there's one legal move, right? Takes, and then you take, and there's not too much else to calculate here. So, yeah. As Stamen says, maybe you don't see it if you're sitting here thinking. Yikes. So let's say we don't see rook h1. How would we be approaching this position as black? We're down a knight, but these pieces are tactically worried at the moment, right? The rook's undefended and lined up. The knight is barely defended, and we can get in here, but queen h1 here, check here, and then we're kind of stuck for a follow-up, right? So what else can we do? I mean, technically, you could trade queens and win a pawn over here, but that's not what we're looking for, and it's not enough to save us either, really. Yeah, so after queen f2, what could black try to find here? Yeah, in terms of that endgame capsus, let's see. Where did I put that line? Like this one here. I mean, I think if white takes the rook and trades these pieces, that might be one of the simpler ways for white to show their advantage. And then here, either you go rook takes a7, or even better, I think, knight d3. Knight d3 prevents the rook from getting behind our passed pawn and from bothering our king on the second rank. You know, plus it could maybe clean up this pawn at some point, giving our king more places to go. And basically this pawn's terrible. You know, what are they going to do? Come defend it like this? Right? Or once the rook is passive, maybe, well, this is defended, we take here and then play knight back to d3 or knight d5. It's pretty easy. So it's definitely that endgame is not going to be what black is looking for. So if we don't see rook h1, what can we do here? I guess you would at least play queen h2 because you can't trade queens. Now the king's a little bit driven out of its home. You don't want to play queen h1, queen g1, but whenever queen comes to g1, you can at least back out now. All right, see you next time, Kavutskiy. I mean, I have nothing fantastic I want to do here next as black. Ugh. Yeah, just trying to find something here is hard. I might actually play this check that I said I wouldn't, just to get a square to retreat my queen, because here I can't move my queen, right? To get the rook in this direction. So I might actually play this check just to back up here. And then my idea is at some point to re-centralize the queen and have my rook always threatening rook h1. Maybe their queen will be stuck here preventing it. So if white played something random here, then maybe queen d8 would be good. Idea queen d3. But, I mean, white does have a lot of pieces bothering me here. Oh, but look, can I come here? Now I'm finding some new angles into the game. Oh. Well, that's too bad. That was so close to working. Maybe I can not take the queen. Try to be even more genius. But white just keeps queening this other pawn, ignoring all this. I can win the whole queen with rook d1, rook b1, and still completely lose. Well, there's no good answer for death by lactose if they don't find rook h1. That's for sure. Let's click on our other board for a moment, see what happened after rook e5. What happened was white thought this entire time. Another 15... at least 18 minutes on this move. Wow. Heavy. Heavy choices. Well, the players are doing it right. They are thinking hard here. They are thinking hard. I find myself in a lot of like suspense around this rook h1 move. But, you know, now that it's been another 10 minutes, I mean, it seems like there's no way that black sees it. For their level, I mean, that's a basic pattern that you know or you don't know, but basically that, you know, 90 some percent of players of this level are going to know this rook h1 move. But I mean, it also kind of shows this thing I often say in chess when I'm talking to people about learning the tactical patterns, is that if you don't know them, even with 10, 20 minutes on the clock, you're not going to reinvent them. You have to have some pattern recognition. You can't just calculate stuff move by move for yourself over the board and just rediscover all the basic tactics, right? Like, you just have to know about, you know, queen h2 checkmate defended by a bishop, right? You have to know about, you guys know that tactic where you play like queen takes h2 check, king takes h2, and then rook h8 checkmate because you've got a knight on e2? I don't know what it's called. Anyway, you know, there's like a couple thousand of these patterns, and basically you know them or you don't, but you're not gonna invent them all on your own. You know, even if you're really strong, nobody can. Am I like frozen or something? Like just not seeing the moves? This shows another death by lactose game. What? Rook h1 check. Thanks, chess.com. Played like 15 minutes ago. And then resigns. So why does chess.com not work at all? Does anybody have any any idea why? What about this game? It won't show it to me. That wasn't Drew Shattuck's game. A million moves played here as well. Good lord. H4, the move we thought about. Rook e8. And here we said rook c to c1, but queen g3 was played, which makes perfect sense as well. Trades, knight into e4, king g2. And yeah, this was a great defense by white. So h4 was correct. Good evening, Casino Chill. Hope you're doing well. Knight f6 going after that pawn. Somehow white wasn't excited about g5, so they defended with the king. And then we're forced to play g5 next. Knight heads into e3. This endgame is still very tense. White needs to move one of those rooks to avoid this knight e3 move. By the way, for the record, folks, Death by Lactose played that rook h1 move in a minute and 8 seconds, which basically means they probably saw it in 8 seconds or 1 second and then spent a minute just double checking, making sure, you know, there's not some trick, there's not some mate, there's not something that you're missing, which is perfect. You've got 40 minutes on your clock. Just because you see a win doesn't mean you have to bash it out. A minute double checking, but there was not really anything else to see, so it's perfect time usage, and Death by Lactose took that game. So, no problem. As I said, 90-some% of players of that rating would know the rook h1 pattern. Now, let's hope that chess.com will like give me updated moves as this game gets played now. Oh, great. We're getting moves. How lovely. Anyone have a strong feeling about who's better in this endgame, white or black? All right, I'll give my answer. I think it's very, very close to equal. I have a slight preference for black. Now, black's pawn structure is slightly worse because of this d5 pawn. But I'm still just preferring black's pieces look a little more active to me than white's. Just a nudge. That would make me slightly prefer to play black here despite that d-pawn. Now, I mean, for one thing, simply this idea of knight e3, I just don't see how this pawn ever gets in trouble. And you can see that if I do something like this, attacking this pawn, if white traded here, of course, we could say the pawn structure is no longer an issue. This is at least fine for black, right? But all these rooks are hanging, so I guess it's forced. And even then, black could take like this if they value the file more than fixing the structure. And this rook has to keep the pawn defended, so white plays something like this move. And yeah, I just think with control of the open file, the one open file, and this pawn not coming under attack, black would be still preferable here, even with the slight pawn weakness. That said, I have this suspicion, black just played knight e3, and then rook e1. But I have this suspicion that the most incisive move for Drew here was f5. On this move where we were just stopping and thinking for a moment. The idea is that I anchor the knight, which is scarily close to this king. And now I free up my rook to go do things on e3, e2, or e1, which could include, threatening weird mating patterns suddenly against white's king. Now, if white takes, I'm happy as well. I just traded this doubled pawn, and I'll play f5 next, and I've made more space for my king to get active, right? I also, before playing this move, I checked h5 for white. And for a moment, I was scared, because I thought if I take and white takes, that's actually not very good for me. The king has a luft. The knight captured. This pawn is hanging. The knight's a little scarily placed. There's knight d6 threatened as well as rook d5. So then I check this move king f7, trying to hold my f5 square. And if white tries to gang up on it, rook h8, and it's over. So then I checked like here. It's like, okay, black's really threatening rook h8, right? Knight f5. If you go rook check, there's knight h4. So I take here, and then I save my knight. And here I said, obviously, white lost. The knight sack didn't work. And once I saw that, I thought, okay, f5. That looks like the best move to me. I like it. I feel like it strengthens my position a little bit, anchors the knight. This king is going to remain badly placed for a while. My rook is free, so I can start, improving it to e3 or e1, bring the next rook to e4. And interestingly, white doesn't have tons of moves. They could do something like this. And then I want to play here, I was thinking. But maybe actually a6 or rook a4 is the simplest. Yeah. a6, knight d6, huh? That's not simple. Maybe this move here is sneakily good. Because this move has like a real threat, which is to trade here, not on e2, and then go to the rank I actually want. This is the end of white, right? Like, just checkmate pattern, rook here, then you could play knight f2 and take the rook, or you could just say, ha 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 ha, your pieces. And just do this. So here, if I go to the first rank, maybe white has to trade to keep control of the second rank. Knight f2 check first. That's very good first knight. Yeah. Nice catch. Either way, white needs to try this instead. Now they still can't grab this because of rook here. So maybe they would grab but they can't grab this because we've got this pattern. Winning that. So white has to play a move with the rook along the second rank, but they can't go here. Oh man, where does white go after this rook e1 thing, huh? King g2, I guess. Has to be played. Oh, good point, first knight. So that means that this move here, rook e2, might be strong enough because it threatens knight f2, and white can't trade. Yeah. Yeah, very nice point first knight. So rook e2, the initial move, is actually more devastating than my fancier move that I came up with later. Okay, so that's kind of the point of f5 knight g4. I just feel like something like this is going to be unpleasant for white. In the game, black, f5 is a weird move. You know, it wasn't the first thing I thought of. Knight e3, that was the first thing I thought of. So that's what's happening in the game. Knight c4 going after b2. Look at that. Black elects not to turn this into a passed pawn, valuing the piece activity even more. And that's like, you know, that's major, this thing here, right? I mean, it's a clean passed pawn. It's well supported. You can play f5 here as well. And black just says, yeah, piece activity. Rook f2. And rook e3. So we get here. Oh, that's great, Falgry. Got to play a nice endgame. Super. Okay, so rook e3 was the move. Knight c2 gets pushed back. Okay, so far black's not making progress with this rook e3 move, right? Just kind of exploratory, but no progress made. I think that the rook and knight, they can't quite break white's position on their own, right? So we need to get the king into the position or have a pawn break or something. Bonne nuit. Yeah, the position is probably super close to equal here. So I think that either I was wrong about black being slightly better, or Drew hasn't played the most precisely here, and there was some important move for black. It could have been f5. It could have been something else. It could have been de4 even. Last move. But somehow the advantage looks pretty minimal / not here. Minimal / non-existent. Yeah, especially with this rook on f2, it's like we can't play f6 or f5 anymore. Our king is always just going to be defending this pawn. I mean, it's still better to centralize it, but it's not going to be super active. You know, it's funny, even before I thought of f5 in this position, I thought of knight e3, of course, but then I also thought of this move. Just trying to make space for my king and make something happen with the pawn structure. And it was only after thinking of f6 that I thought, well, would I be happy to play f5? And then I thought, yeah, I would be, you know, and I'm happy with gf, of course, so let's just play f5. So it was a process to find it. But yeah, here black doesn't seem to have much. Both sides could stand to improve their kings. And I would actually call this a 3-result endgame because I think it's very close to equal, but each side has its own advantages, right? And also knight endgames are very volatile in that, like, even a relatively small advantage can sometimes prove decisive or significant. Like, you can make a lot out of little sometimes. For example, black could easily wind up in some position where the d5 pawn is lost or just too weak. And white could easily drop a pawn on b2 or a4 or end up in some situation where the king is stuck on the h-file. So there's a lot of possibilities for the advantage to suddenly swing. Well, these people are doing such a great time of using... Did I say such a great time? These players are doing such a good job of using their time that I'm going to grab myself a glass of water to keep the mouth talking. Be right back. And actually, it's a good point. We have been sitting here for over 2 hours, right? And it is not great to just sit in place for 2 hours and not do anything. So it would be good to look left or right, look somewhere in the distance, come back to it. Yeah, I'll be right back. Ah, that's better. Yeah, question. Would I go a5 here to kick the knight off of a good square? Knight e3 was played. I think this was live first night. Knight e3 was played while I was away. I considered a5 as well. That was like my first thought here. Taking the pressure off d5 so that white doesn't suddenly attack it with the rook and win it. But once I realized that knight here is preventing rook here, I thought, no, I shouldn't commit my pawn structure. And I thought, best I can do, just king f8, king e7 for black. That's what I would do. King f8. I would expect white to do something similar. You know, I'd come here. Now my king's in range to defend that pawn, right? And maybe to push this pawn. So that's what I would do for black. It's nothing fancy, you know. I wish I had like some, you know, masterful endgame insight for you here. But I feel like just moving back and forth with the rook and knight is not really accomplishing anything for either side. So I would just play these humble moves. Developing. That's all I got. So white decides to tie up these pieces. Other possibilities included rook here. I see the idea. Black's keeping white's king from getting back towards the game easily. And since the pawn's defended against rook d2, you could always kick here. Okay, fine, but it's not doing much. White could do anything here. They chose rook e2, and black now plays the f-pawn move. But at a moment where this stuff is tied up, ooh la la. Rook e7 to get out of range of the knight. You don't want to walk into knight c5 here as black, I think. Like rook e4, rook e6, I think are both out because of knight c5, hitting the rook, which has to keep the knight defended. You come here and then takes. All right, we should throw in gf to be more precise, but knight takes. And then I guess the best you can do is this, 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 and this. Okay, the pure rook endgame's a draw. Rook e7, I think. Yep, played. I'm thinking maybe knight f4 here. Played. Good. And then I would expect king f7. And then what do I want to do? King f7's been played. Now as white, I guess I was planning to maybe go back to d2 now. With the rook. Like this. For white, but black can just do this. They're very happy to split those pawns up. Maybe here and the knight's weirdly stuck, huh? Not amazing. Let's see. GF played. Okay. That's fine. White could just play something like g4 to bring the king into the game. Nope, they play my kind of a move. Going after d5. There's plenty of other games. Yeah, we can check other games if you want. So here's this one from before. Black's just gotten the knight off of h5. Things look maybe slightly better for black. Or maybe equal. Maybe I just like the bishop a little bit too much. But it seems like black's pretty comfortable. You know, the white knights aren't finding any great squares in the center. Black can counter on this file. This pawn's not that dangerous yet. So I slightly like the bishop. Another game here. Well, the other game seems to be done. And then there's the under 1600 tournament, right? Which has other players and games potentially. Oh no, I don't see any other current games in the under 1600 despite like more than a dozen players in there. Okay, let's refresh this one. Yeah, white's got a minute here against 50 minutes for black. They started with 90 minutes each. Where's the bread? Very often in this kind of time pressure. Pretty standard for them. Not every single game though. I've seen exceptions. $30 seconds. Yikes. This is what I would have done for whoops. Ay. What happened to my screen capture just now? Is that better? Nope. board just got all mixed up. Ugh. If I try and fight more with chess.com, I'll just lose any board completely. All right, so, okay. So annoying, but this is what I would do as black. I would fight for the D file and just leave the E pawn kind of ignored and blockaded. So that's exactly what I would want to do. The knight on F4 is keeping this rook from contesting the file, right, and protecting the other one. So here we get the D file. Knight E6, Queen H4. And now I just want to trade queens and play Rook D2. It feels like it's just dropping into my hands as black here. The advantage is getting bigger. Because Queen H4, Knight H4 deflects the knight from D2, Rook D2. And if white plays Rook E2, you can trade rooks and collect the pawn on E5. Right? Easy as you like. Trade and Rook D4 also possible. Yes. Similar first knight. Similar position, probably. Very good move as well. Trades. Rook D4 going after the C pawn. And again, Rook E4. You can trade. Trade. Take on E5. Maybe then Knight C5 is a little... No, the Knight on E6 is there. Yeah, so there's nothing complicated about it. Perfectly good. Black wisely using their time. Might as well. Is there anything else good other than Queen H4? No, but maybe Queen H4, Knight H4, and then choosing whether you want to play Rook D4 or Rook D2 is kind of the big thing that Black's thinking about. Like if we play Rook D2 and White plays B3, we'd rather trade on E2 because the knight would be worse on E2, but if White plays B3, maybe we can't win a pawn. I mean, we can play Knight D4 and kind of lock White out of the game maybe, but it's different than winning. Yeah. So maybe it's better to be sure to win a pawn with Rook D4. Yeah. Seems to make sense. our other game. Now it won't show me the other game. He goes for rook d2. Oh my god, I am so steamed. All right, let it go, David. Let it go. It's too bad. It's just too bad. Currently playing, but I'm not allowed to watch. All right, knight f4. This is about where we were on this game. Rook d2. Rook e5 defending it. Okay, I think knight c4, remember, was like a big question. Rook e5 defending it. Knight d3. Knight f4. g5. Takes, 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 takes. So black chooses to be down a pawn instead of repeating. What? That move makes some of the least sense of any move. Maybe black planned rook d7? Because they now stopped and thought for 4 minutes here. They played g5 in 7 seconds. Had they planned rook here as like a tactic? And then noticed rook check and knight takes knight? Instead, they come here. Oof. Yeah, and white's trying to punish it. They're not willing to just trade off pawns here. They're going to try to win this game for sure. Next step would be king g4. Then you can give check while keeping your c-pawn defended and take the g-pawn with the king. Hey, Lucky J. I mean, I stream this one pretty much every week, Friday Night Fights. From 8 p.m. Pacific until, you know, whenever the players get tired or I get tired or something, you know. There's some kind of a calendar on the training site. I don't know if you use the website, but have you ever seen this calendar on Chess Dojo? I mean, on it, there's always, it shows Friday Night Fights, weekly event. Same with the Saturday viewer tournaments, weekly event. And even when I can't stream, I mean, the tournament still happens. Rook e2. All right, so preparing to answer king here with rook check, I suppose. And if king here, rook check, king here, then there would be a rook here. Check. G4. White gets room here, right? Against this, you just check. Your rook keeps defending everything and your king takes. White played king f3, you know, just pushing the king away. Okay, it looks fine, but Is king h5 not winning? You played tonight. Okay, cool, Lucky. That's cool. I'm glad you were playing. There was a week where I didn't stream it because in January, because I played an OTB game one Friday night at a tournament. But that's pretty rare for me. I play like one tournament a year. And then there was one Friday a couple weeks back where I was sick and had also lost my voice. Like I couldn't speak. And I didn't stream it that week either. So I guess it has been twice in 2025. Yeah, of course. You can watch the commentary after the fact. It looks like this move should have won for white. It seems to me. King h5. Let me see if I can think of any kind of defense for black. So threat number A for white is to literally just take this with the rook, defending that pawn. And then if black played something like rook c4, we would just move the rook back to c5, defending. Oh, maybe black could trade and push the a pawn. Here. Here. Oh my god. Look at this. Okay, so I don't know exactly what to do to just sort of stand still for black, but let's say this for argument's sake. Here. Here. And my intention had been to save the c pawn like this, but takes, push, and I think black might win. No, I should be able to at least draw for white because I get g5 with check. Let's think a moment. Because this looks bad. g4, a4, g5, a3, g6, a2, g7, a1, queens. Oh yeah, I can't lose for white. Looks like I probably still win for white. Maybe he can still win for white. Maybe king e7, so it's not queening with check. But okay, let me try this. Here, check. Let me try and get the maximum profit from this check. I think black's best defense will be here. Then I'll go here, 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 here. Right, and white's almost winning. I guess if we queen, there's check and check. So we should queen here. Centralize our queen. And then, oops, better defend my pawn. And then bring the king. I don't know if this is winning or not. Seems like with the king in front of the pawn, you can make a lot of queen trades and draw as black. So I think this should be a draw. Okay. That said, black doesn't have a lot of moves to pass the time here. And like this a6 move that I played surely loses to, taking the a6 pawn. So black would be in pseudo Zugzwang here, actually. I mean, maybe g4 is their best move, but rook e3 is the first move I looked at. Then check, trying to drive the king. I want to play g4, by the way, but I noticed rook h3, so I, tried to be patient and gave this check first. If the king goes back, then I set up this idea with g4, and now my king's always threatening this pawn. They have to do this. Okay, at least we know rook c5 doesn't win because of trades. But let's say rook here. This should lose for black. They're too passive. They can't defend all this. King's been cut back by our rook. And if they try and counterattack, it's never enough because we're taking two pawns. So that's a winning situation. If the king comes forward, we have g4. If the king comes forward, we check it away from our g-pawn and just clean up. looks completely winning. I see just nothing for black to do after king h5. That's my take. King h5 wins. King f3 was played. Rook e1. b5. Yeah, I'm not impressed by that move, but it makes some sense too, right? It's sort of keeping this pawn from advancing because of this. And white wants to play c4 and then start, you know, trying to attack the a-pawn with this rook at some point, with some rook c6 or something. Black needs to stay on the e-file. And if the king comes here, check. If the rook comes here, takes, a5. The king's in the box. Rook here, takes. Maybe king e5. No, king e6. King e4, king d6. Yeah, that's good for black. So king g4, checks again, and goes in now. Now checks. Okay, same thing from before. White could have also built one more move with c4, so the pawns were more defending each other and then gone forward. But they now go here, give the check, and it's looking like it could be very similar to what I was saying before, and thus winning for white. I said with the pawn on b4 it was winning. The pawn on b5 shouldn't mean that it's not winning. So I would guess that this is winning for white here as well. So black is going to pay heavily for that crazy g5 move. Sacking a pawn in an equal endgame. It won't let me watch the other game at the same time, huh? Yeah, it's not a noob question at all, Lucky J. I mean, rook endings are tricky, but basically it was so that when the king comes up to threaten this pawn, you want to be able to check him back and force him back here. And there's no other file right now where black can give this fourth rank check because of this c pawn and this rook. If you came around here to defend your a pawn, then after king here, check c4 covers the king, shelters him, right? And white's plan to take this pawn is not to play rook takes g5 and allow rook c4 or something. The plan is to check the king and force it away from the pawn, right? And then take on g5 with your king. That way you keep your rook defending your c pawn. And you also keep your rook far away from their king so you don't fall into any tricks like, okay, let's say I go like here for black, here. You see, now it's like a problem for us that our rook is so close to their king, right? Because we have to keep it defended. But the idea is to go check, and then whether they go back or forwards, we can take this pawn for free, and that's still defended. And if black at this point, you know, goes after this pawn, then I guess we could take this with our rook instead of our king, since now this pawn's not attacked. So we'd go check. I'm just showing you good technique. You know, this move might work here, like this. But good technique is not to give your opponent these kind of moves. It's to always play the checking move, force them there, take this with check, come back to safety, keeping everything covered. Or if the king went this way, we take like this, right? And our king keeps this defended. If they come here, we swing back over. And then slowly, you know, you go like king f4, h4, and you move your g-pawn, and you advance your king, etc. So that's basically, that's why the rook is hanging around on the e-file. It needs to try to stop this king g4 winning plan, which wins no matter what, but you want to at least try to prevent it. But white goes here. Maybe what black should have done while marking time here was actually king g6. Because then if king g4, our king covers both penetrations, we can check him back and then wait. And while we're waiting, if white checks, we can come here. I don't love this, but It doesn't immediately lose. You know, the white king can't get in. See this and this barrier? And if the king can't get in, it's going to be hard for white to simply win this. Okay, let's see where they're going in the live position. In the live position, king came to h5. The rook came back here, attacking this pawn. Here I want to play g4, but I don't want rook h3 checkmate, so I give check. Check. Almost. I would have stayed on c4 to defend all my pawns. Rook check. King g3. King g5. No! My pawn! Ay, ay, ay. You see how close white was to winning this, folks? What a small difference. Rook f6 in the game. Rook c4. King somewhere. Take with your king. So each of your pieces does its job of defending things. Oh, but now there's this. When I first had this plan, the pawn was on b4, not b5. So it's not even that simple. Now you'd have to do something like rook here. Then the king comes here. You have to check the king away to stop rook h3, king here, and then play c4. So that was not easy at all. But even then, there's this. So everything makes a difference in endgames. The pawn on b5 was slightly worse. And here if c4, there's going to be rook e4 again. So what can we do? Here, 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 here. Is this the idea for white? You threaten c7. Rook here, rook c6. So they have to go here, get behind the pawn. Can we take this? If rook check, we can block and defend b5. And if a6, the rook's defending this pawn, so we can just go in. So we go king g5. This king's cut off. And then eventually you bring the king around here and you win. But that's not easy to find. But I think that is a win here for white. Instead of trading pawns like in the game, I think it's a clear win to go c4, c5, c6. Yeah. Okay, that said, what white's doing might also be winning, actually. King g5 here, here. Basically, this king has a hard time dealing with this passed pawn white's just created. So this could be winning. And white was even careful. This move, rook f5, would be incautious because of here. So king f5, rook back, g5, rook here. So now, big decision for white, you know, do you sack the b pawn or do you push it to not sack it? Right, or do you go king h6, they take, you push g6? Both are winning. So it's just winning for white here. White chose king h6. So the other choice is b6 to make sure not to lose that pawn. And the key move is that in this position as white, king h6 should win. I don't know if like a million other moves also win. But that is one key little detail. Is that you can play king h6. Your rook's stopping these checks. You're trying to push the pawn relatively quickly. And if rook g5, this check will win the rook. So king h6 would be nice there. But I don't think the a pawn is far enough advanced to be a problem either. I think we can just sack like this and push and keep pushing. Now rook b8. There's rook here. Rook check, king here, rook check, king here. a5 starts to run. All right, if queening, there's this. So one thing you could do is probably here, 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 right? That gets you a queen. White just queened. Check here, takes, takes. The black king's cut off. So you just play rook a6 and clean up. And white duly wins this interesting rook endgame. Quite well played by white. After black gave the pawn. Yeah, the rook ending was quite well played there. Oh, the idea with g5 was to play g4 check at the critical moment. We could tell from the time usage that something went wrong because g5 was played in 7 seconds, right? And then after knight d5, black stopped and thought for 4 minutes. So the idea was g4 check. And then the king can't go to h2 because of knight f1. And if the king goes here, you wanted to play something like king g6 followed by mate, except the knight's attacking all your pieces. So you wanted to do, I'm not sure what at this point. Your opponent played the rook ending quite nicely to win that rook ending up a pawn. It was very well done. Yeah, it's hard to see. I mean, knight d5 is what they were threatening because you were playing previously knight f4, rook e5 to defend the pawn, right? Knight f4. So you knew that what they wanted to play was knight d5. So when you attack with this pawn, you have to expect knight d5. You must have had some hallucination tactic of what you were going to do here, and then it didn't work. Like, you know, rook h7 checkmate, or I thought maybe rook d7, and then there's rook f2. Oops. But you had some idea here because you... Well, then it's a really good thing, Shattuck Chess, if you haven't played longer than 15-10 in 6 months and you just spent, you know, about 90 minutes or so on this game, maybe even 100 minutes of your time, plus whatever time you thought on your opponent's turn, you definitely made a big move back into using time. It's a great experience, I would think. Getting back into that kind of time control. That's the only way to do it, is by doing it. You can watch the video on demand to catch some more of my thoughts. But I think that right when you get into the end game, there's a very key moment right around here, where this end game seems like maybe slightly better for black or maybe equal. And you went for knight e3, knight c4, and here maybe you should have straightened out your pawns right away. But I think in this position, instead of knight e3, another move that's very interesting is f5. So you can rewatch some of the commentary on it if you want, or you can look at this move on your own if you're interested in adding another habit of reviewing your own games into your new practice. But anyway, I think this was like a real... You were really bummed for missing f5. Oh, you thought about it later in the game? You're going to annotate and then head to bed. Sick. Very good. Yeah, because I saw like many moves later, you played f6 finally to sort of gain space and break up this area a little bit. But very interesting question if this would have been more... Yeah, you saw the strength of it later. Okay, cool. So I don't even know if it's good, right? I mean, I'm just going off my own thoughts and instincts here, but it struck me as potentially an interesting move. Okay, looks like Chex's game with Where's the Bread has just finished as well. And what happened? Checks 1. So let's see what happened here. We'd been watching up to here, and someone in chat had suggested rook d4, which I think was better than my rook d2 suggestion, which I had thought first. I think it was... first knight. Yeah, first knight, who suggested this move might be clearer. Attacking here and here, kind of pseudo-forcing this move, or, sort of winning a pawn no matter what choice white makes, I think. But you went rook d2, which should also be good, but then after b3, we don't immediately win anything, right? So, okay, so rook e2, tightening screws. Other move I thought, knight d4, also tightening screws. It stops rook e2. It introduces the idea of rook here, rook takes at some point. And against knight f3, the plan is to take, and if the rook takes, they drop a pawn, so we do this to the pawn structure. I don't know. I don't know how convincing it is. I mean, it's certainly good for black, but okay, you went rook c2, which makes sense, knight f3, and knight d4 anyway. Okay. Maybe similar. So you're threatening rook takes c3, white plays king f1 to stop that, and now bishop h6. Oh, this is very interesting, because already here you could also play rook c1, right? Oh, this is completely winning for black, actually, after king f1. I don't know if Where's the Bread had a better defense than king f1, but it would have to be something that you can also find in, 30 to 60 seconds because of the time pressure at this point. Ah, you thought rook d4, knight f3, rook takes b3, and your rook could be trapped. Yeah. If we put it on the board, do you see any way out for the rook? Like if you... Because this is one of the things we do after a game, is we sort of like take some of the things we calculated during a game, just play them out on a board and ask ourselves, when I see this on a board, does it look the same as when I kind of imagined/calculated it, right? Okay, you're seeing the b4 square now. Now, from b4, you don't exactly have a clear escape plan, but your rook is at least alive, right? Maybe the same could be said for rook f4, g3, rook f5, and if they go g4, you're still sort of alive, right? And you could try to, I don't know, find enough space around the rook to keep him alive there, but it doesn't really have a clear route out. Same with rook b4. Like, you're not really going to get anywhere to b6 or anything, but I guess you could maybe play c4 if white doesn't deal with you. Right? And if they play like knight d2, I guess we're still in some weird calculations maybe for a little bit longer. There's, I think, a clearer move to show that black has won the game, basically. It's exactly the kind of move you wouldn't see in advance 3 or 4 moves before, but when it's on the board now, maybe. Me maybe pushing a little bit too much. Yeah. So you could come back out through here. Because of this, you'll take the knight, your bishop will come out. So they shouldn't even take the rook probably, but then you can just retreat it and use your pawn majority and your bishop. So it's technically winning, I would think, at a GM versus GM level. So, okay. So that's just interesting for you, Checks. And for anyone else, I mean, it's like an interesting thing about how you think about your own games afterwards. Because sometimes people say, what do I do when I try to review a game or analyze a game? What am I supposed to do? Well, maybe just go to like any random variation that you thought of during the game, play it out on the board, and then ask yourself, just play it out on the board and ask yourself, what do I think when I actually see it on the board? Does this match up with what I imagined during the game? And yes, it counts as a pawn majority if it's because you have an extra pawn. Like, and this is not even me being funny about anything, Novest, but like some players who might be up 1, 2, or even 3 pawns in the endgame, more sort of beginner level players, they won't know how to win the endgame. And the first step for them would be they need to look around the board and figure out where they've got a pawn majority, where they've got a candidate passed pawn that they could turn into a passed pawn. That's how they're going to partly win the endgame. So yeah, those are still considered majorities. You could have a majority on both sides of the board sometimes, right? Which seems really grim for your opponent at the level you guys play at, but is quite standard at a level, 500 points below you. And there are players who don't know how to win the endgame when they've got majorities on both sides of the board. Which again is no insult to anyone, because I was once one of those players. I could have not won even if I had passed pawns on both sides of the board. There was just no endgame I could win. Long, long ago. I did, Lucky J Lolo. I mainly looked at a pair of Caro-Kann advanced games. You had a Panov. Okay, so you were a different Caro game, not the one I watched. Sorry. So here, yeah. So black threatens rook takes knight, knight here. And after king f1, I think this sequence black plays is basically winning. Okay, so on knight c2, there's this, because you're blocking your own ability to take here, right? That's why you didn't do that. So black just tightens the noose or takes just the e-pawn. Now knight c2 gets played. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Could have tried knight d1. At this point, knight d1. And for now, all you've got is a pawn plus position. You're saying here as well, knight d1. Yeah. Okay, but you can do this, this. And it's a similar situation, right? You're up a pawn, and bishop is better than the knight. Pawn structure on the king side, right? You have every hope to win. But yes, it's much better to lose a pawn and keep playing a longer game than to lose the piece to the first rank issues. Yeah. Okay, so we want advice for white earlier on in this game. Okay. Czech says that their 10-year-old played the move a6 here for them. Which is funny. I think already this move, knight c5, looks reasonable. I don't know what the queen is fishing for here on this side of the board, because I think already this bishop is so valuable that I think basically you can't give it. I see that happen like next move, right? a6, rook e1, knight c5, and then you give that piece. So any advantage for white is going to be gone with that dark squared bishop, I think. Yeah, and this is like fairly easy play for black. If you get to this situation here, I guess you have to keep the knight off of f4. Like maybe queen d2 or something. You double their pawns, but the dark squared bishop is too good. Like, look at this position. You know, the dark squares are just going to be weak forever. You eventually lost on those dark squares, right? To bishop h6, bishop f4. Bishop h6, bishop f4. Not being able to defend your e-pawn. Not being able to chase their rook out of c1. Knight out of d4. Those squares were just weak for the rest of the game. You always have to like worry about the b2 pawn. d4 square as an outpost, because if they ever play cd4, their structure is really good. Okay, so let's go straight from the beginning. So bishop e3, e5. Okay, so first of all, if you play h3, you should play d5. These moves go together. The reason is that in general, if you play like an e takes d4 position like you got in the game, if this pawn gets attacked a lot, normally you want to be able to play f3. Like you want to be able to play knight d4 and they attack this pawn a bunch, you know, and they attack it. At some point you want to play f3, but then you don't want your pawn on h3. You want it on h2. They can play knight h5 and, you know, queen h4, knight f4, knight g3, bishop e5, and there's enough counterplay for black. Always, if your pawn's on h3. But if your pawn's on h2, then you're okay to hold your space advantage. Yes, the terrible light squared bishop is part of why you don't play bishop takes c5. If you had a more random and balanced control of light and dark squares, no vest for the dreary, then it wouldn't necessarily be such a big deal to have one of your bishops traded by a knight. The other one would still be okay. But in this position, you have one bishop that's super good and one that's super bad. Right? So trading the super good one is even more obviously problematic because it leaves behind the super bad one. Okay? So, but if you're going to play a system with h3, then when your opponent plays c5 or e5, your default should be to push the pawn to go with h3. So that's like the first little nuance here. h3, it prevents knight g4, and it allows in many cases this g4 move fighting against black's f5. But it's a lost tempo if the game opens up, or you know, it's like a costly tempo move in an open game, less costly in a closed game. Plus, there's the whole thing that in these ed4 positions you might need to play f3. So you should definitely answer e5 with d5. That's like 100%. You don't like closed positions. If you don't like closed positions, then don't play h3. If you like open positions, you can't spend your time playing little like h3s and a3s and things like that, right? Wait, also you're playing like a bunch of space grabbing pawn moves and you don't want a closed position? Look how much time you're spending, right? Preventing knight g4, bishop g4, like building up a pawn center. When you spend a bunch of time, you're just not on pawn moves. You're not poised for an open position. So you're pricing yourself into, you want the position to be closed because you're investing so much time in building a positional advantage, which is a space advantage. Then when your opponent plays e5, it's like the culmination of your dream. You grab your space advantage, and instead you now decide, oh, I should be developing quickly. Gosh, and especially after they waste a move with queen e7, you should go here. Checks, not to make a big deal, but you should know in hindsight you should just take on d4 the moment you get the chance if they've played an h3 line. You don't want to play any fancy rook e8 or queen e7 moves holding the tension because d5 is just good for white, period, at this point compared to e takes d4. So take your chance if they give it to you. But you see what I mean, Novest, for the jury? You've played all these pawn moves, which suggests that you're going to be behind in time. Being behind in time matters less if the position's closed. And your space advantage that you're building, you can get more of it by playing d5. When you allow e takes d4, you undo the value of most of some of your other moves up to this point. So the problem is, if you have a bias and you want to play open positions, not closed positions, then you need to play moves that will be good for you in an open position, right? Okay, what would be a good anti-King's Indian line for someone who wants open positions? Here's one thing you could do, Novest, for the jury, okay? This is not, what I'm about to suggest to you is not considered like an A+ line by 2700 level players, okay? But what I'm going to show you is moves that are consistent with the moves that someone who wants an open position would play. Does that make sense? So I'm going to show you moves that are consistent with what you might want. Because to some extent, like, you know, playing moves like c4, like a 2700 player who plays d4 is likely to play in this position, is they are going to play for space advantages and they're going to be comfortable playing closed positions because they're playing from move 2 pawn moves intended to gain positional advantages at the cost of time. So they're not going to want open positions. So here is an opening that I've played a bunch in my life that I think would be more consistent with someone who wants an open position. You develop a piece. You have the idea of playing e4, which takes center and development because of your bishop. Right? So you go knight c3. Now, if black plays like a King's Indian, this position is just great for white. Right? Now, basically, they have to switch to a Pierce defense. Of course, the Prophet's suggestion of just playing e4 on the first move does make a lot of sense as well, right? But, okay, after knight c3, you could go d5. Right? Now, here's the consistent move. Bishop g5. This is something that I've played extensively as white. The idea is, with these moves here, I'm fighting for control over e4 and d5, and I'm also developing quickly. Right? And what I'm basically doing is I'm playing the Ruy Lopez, but flipped, right? Like a queenside Ruy Lopez. And because I'm developing quickly and because my moves are aimed at playing e4, I'm likely to get a more open game. Right? So I can very quickly show you some of the type of positions that I tended to get. One thing was sometimes people play knight d7 if they're precious about doubled pawns, right? You know, the personality. They don't want a doubled pawn. They're not sure how to play that position, so they develop this way. Now, it looks like a good developing move, but actually because it blocks the bishop, it slightly messes with their development. Now, I would play queen d2 and castle queenside very quickly. And what I'm ready to do at some point is play e4 as a pawn sacrifice, like a Blackmer-Deemer kind of idea. So once I had somebody play, what did they play against me that made me play it very, very soon? I think once I had somebody play, what did they play? Knight b6 immediately looking at knight c4, and then I just played e4 right away, here, 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 saying, okay, you made two moves with the knight, and then I castle queenside. And the Blackmer-Deemer style of game, Novest, is to play f3 at some point. And you trade your f-pawn for the e-pawn, and then you've got these two half-open files. Now, is this as good as the bayonet attack against the King's Indian defense? No. You know, Kramnik or Kasparov or a supercomputer would tell you that, white should do something like the bayonet attack against the king's Indian defense. But if you want a more open game, this is logical. All these moves hold together. Also, I often had people play something like e6. Then I play e4 as a pawn sack, and they go like h6 here, 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 and grab a pawn. Right? Then I'll poke at the king side. They can play rook g8 or bishop g7 or g4, but I'm just making a little more weakness on the king side and developing my rook, potentially. Right? And let's say they do this, and then I castle queen side. And again, I'm going to play f3. And, there's some... here we could just take the pawn on g5, huh? That would be fine for white. More than fine. Yeah. Okay, I think maybe they'll play f3. And I'll castle. And then, bishop e7 or g7 or something, and then f3. So again, you're playing logically towards an open game. Why? Because you developed quickly, right? Do you see how we're developing kind of quickly here from white? And also fighting for central squares. I haven't played any a3 or h3 kind of moves, just losing time for positional gain. I would say the same thing about like this system here. Like imagine somebody's playing this against the Nimzo. And then they say, I want open positions. Well, you've just played like all pawn moves, right? It might not be consistent with wanting an open game. So. Another thing you might get is like bishop f5, right? And then f3, playing for e4 at some point. And depending how they play, you could land e4, or, they could do something like this, and you could land e4. Or they could now play knight d7, and then there's a very tricky line that starts like this. This is, again, going to lead to a semi-open position for you, right? Like, as Prophet suggested, if you'd started with 1e4. What about the exchange variation of the King's Indian? That's fine. You can play that if you want. Yeah. As long as you're okay with queen trades, it's perfectly fine. But you don't want to play h3 if you're planning to play the exchange variation, right? Or maybe h3 is fine. But you're wanting to play some position like this, you're saying, right? I don't know, something like this. Or maybe here. I don't know. If you don't mind playing endgames, in fact, if you like playing endgames, I highly recommend this. If you don't like playing endgames, then I only recommend this if you want to work on that, so to speak, weakness, right? Or area that you like less. Alrighty. Let's you had a winning position on move 17. Why is your position winning on move 17? Queen d2? Or something else? Queen d2 is winning? Interesting. So, right, we stop knight f4. And we threaten bishop takes g6 to win a pawn. Yeah. Yeah, when I saw this knight go to h5, I was worried for black for a moment there. I think when black played c6, they were saying they're worried about knight d5. But I think checks probably doesn't need to be worried about knight d5, right? Like if you just develop the rook here and white plays knight d5, again, maybe we have to calculate e5 more than knight d5, right? Oh, e5 and then knight d5. Okay, I get it. I think that's why no vest for the jury, because you're right, knight d5 you can always just take and the bishop's happy, black doesn't care. I think the worry was probably e5, knight h5, then knight d5. You talking to me, Fubs? All the kids stuff? I don't know. But I think what we can see, no vest for the jury, is black needed to keep a square on e8 or d7 for this knight in most cases, right? So somehow bishop d7, black tangled up this knight. Your queen wasn't that well placed on a4, was it? So maybe the most logical move for black was just here. If knight d5, we're ready to trade it. And if e5, we can drop back. On chesskid.com, Fubs, long ago, I did chesskid.com, yes. But it was a while ago. Hey, Yvonne, that was you. Okay, cool. Oh, you played that rook ending really nicely, but you've already heard me say that by this time, so I don't need to repeat it. Right, then you didn't like it in the first place. Yeah, I mean, your queen a4, it's just not well placed, right? It should be ignored or whatever. Yeah. But the other thing that tells you, no vest for the jury, is like, even if you don't know the position, you know, there's always going to be opportunities for you and your opponent, right? Like, you had the queen d2 opportunity in this game. Your opponent had opportunities as well. You each had opportunities. Chess can be frustrating, but, I mean, the fact that you each have opportunities is not the most frustrating part of chess. I mean, you didn't just straight up lose the game because you don't know the King's Indian well or something like that, right? It was surprising because you didn't just get a bad position. Yeah. Yeah, checks, you saw queen d2. You were sort of semi-expecting it. It looked pretty strong. Oh, also, Yvonne, that h4 queen g3, that was a very good defense to a position that was starting to look scary for white. That was stronger than anything we saw in, like, 15 minutes that we were all sitting around talking about your game. I have not seen it, Michael Wold. No. Exactly. Bishop d7 was wrong. Your knight had no other squares. You took a square from it, and you just sent your opponent's queen to a better square. So definitely bishop d7 had to be wrong. We don't know exactly what the best move was immediately. It might not be bishop e6. It might be something trickier than that, but we know that bishop d7 was not good. All right, let's make tomorrow morning's rapid tournaments, yeah? Club arenas. Saturday rapid under 1300. So it's going to be a 3-hour arena as usual, 15 minutes plus 5-second incremento. February 22nd at 9:30 a.m. Yeah, something's not working here. Like, nothing's working. Available now, the Checkmate game, All's Fair in Love and Chess. How about just making live chess work? How about just reverting to live chess? Like digging up the code from 3 years ago or 5 years ago instead of inventing new nonsense. Clubs, Chess Dojo, upcoming events, none. So it seems like that event didn't happen. Redo it all. Wrap it under 1300. No, it's showing 3 hours, 15.5. As if it knows that I just set a tournament up. Upcoming events? No. I'm afraid I'm going to make this tournament multiple times now. It's not showing up. Okay, let's make the 1300 one next. Just in case. 13 to 1700. 3 hour arena, 15 plus 5. Saturday, 9:30. Create. Copy the link. I hear you, Falgry. It's a good attitude that you could enjoy this. You enjoyed your game, you enjoyed watching some commentary, and you might miss tomorrow, and that's fine. You'll do it another time. 13 to 1700. Okay, let's go to the club and see if that shows up as an upcoming event. It does not. Interesting. Okay. Tournaments, create. Club Arena. Saturday Rapid, 1700 plus. Create that over there. Throw it in 1700 plus. Okay, and maybe by tomorrow the tournaments will show up in the club here as upcoming events. We'll see. All right. Hey, you're welcome, Lucky J. Glad you liked it. Sorry I didn't catch your game this week, but maybe another time. And I'm going to wish everybody good night at this point.